Chapter 586. Cloud Mist Restaurant. Yu's long, fair legs were bare as she floated in the store. Her long, pitch-black hair floated in the air, twining around her like ribbons. All of a sudden, her long eyelashes trembled, and her tightly shut eyes opened. As if she had sensed something, a trace of doubt appeared on her ice-cold face. The big black dog, who was lying in front of the path understanding tree, was snoring away. Every time it breathed, a peculiar energy would seep out and be absorbed by the path understanding tree. The branches of the path understanding tree swayed, and it seemed to sprinkle down a star-like radiance. Lord Go wrinkled his doggy nose, yawned, and opened his eyes. "Girl, there seems to be a familiar aura. That aura should be coming for you," Lord Go said lazily, and his magnetic voice reverberated in the air. Yu's gaze turned to Lord Go, and she nodded. "In the secret realm," Yu said. Lord Go's doggy mouth instantly drew back. "In the secret realm? What a coincidence! Isn't that brat Bufang also in the secret realm? Do you think that guy will go find Bufang? After all, that guy should be able to sense the aura on Bufang's body, which is related to you." Lord Go's words stunned Yu, and she became silent. After a while, Yu opened her mouth. "Then I'll go find Bufang in the secret realm. I can't let that guy hurt Bufang. I still want to continue eating dragon blood rice." After Yu finished speaking, her mind moved, and the netherworld ship, which had quietly landed in front of the path understanding tree, started to sway. In the next instant it floated up and fiercely hit the air, tearing a hole in it. Yu's small feet tapped the air, and her graceful figure instantly floated up, landing on the netherworld ship. With a swoosh, the netherworld ship directly entered the void and disappeared. The Lord Go looked at the empty netherworld ship and yawned. Then, he continued to lie down to sleep while muttering to himself, "This girl only thinks about her dragon blood rice. The Lord Go's sweet and sour ribs cannot be lost." 80 stared from afar, flapping its wings and brushing off a few feathers. The sudden disappearance of the underworld ship made it a little dumbfounded, as if it was beyond its intelligence. Luo Li's eyes were filled with madness. His move was beyond everyone's expectations. The Shura Saintess had a complicated expression on her face as she watched Luo Li make his move from afar. After when Rincho recovered from his initial shock, he regained his cold smile. Being able to watch Bufang die was not a bad choice. Alu, Awei, and the other survivors all felt a little ashamed. This Luo Li's cultivation was a waste, and he actually did such a disgusting thing like sneak attacks. When Bufang was using all his strength to fight against the Supreme Blade Tyrant, he actually encountered Luo Li's sneak attack. This was simply a disaster. Originally, fighting against the Supreme Blade Tyrant was already so tiring. Facing the sneak attack of an expert at the peak of the divine physique echelon who had broken through 5 Supreme Being shackles, how could Bufang withstand it? At this moment, Bufang seemed to have fallen into a hopeless situation. However, only Luo Li, who had personally experienced everything, knew how afraid he was in his heart. His sure-kill sword was something that even an expert at the peak of the divine physique echelon of the same realm would not be able to withstand, let alone an ant who had just entered the divine physique echelon. However, the truth was that his sure-kill sword could not even break through the defense of Bufang's clothes. The blood sword was held by Bufang. Bufang's eyes were cold as he stared at Luo Li. The black turtle constellation walk appeared in his hand, whistling as it smashed down. Luo Li, who was dumbstruck like a wooden chicken, flew into a rage out of humiliation. He raised his palm and smashed it towards the black turtle constellation walk. A mere walk was directly sent flying. However, only a loud bang could be heard. Luo Li felt as if his palm had smashed onto an incomparably hard boulder. That boulder was like a small mountain, and it was difficult to move it. Bang! The black turtle constellation walk ruthlessly smashed onto Luo Li's head, causing the latter to be somewhat dumbfounded. Luo Li covered his head and squatted on the ground. The vermilion robe on Bu Fang's body shone brilliantly, and the feathers of the vermilion robe fluttered about. The powerful defense of 5 seconds of invincibility allowed Bu Fang to remain unscathed under Luo Li's sneak attack. Perhaps this was something that Luo Li did not expect. Bu Fang was also a little angry in his heart. He never would have thought that this Luo Li would actually launch a sneak attack, causing him to be in a slightly sorry state. The 2 smashes from the wok had made Luo Li a little dumbfounded. Bu Fang didn't have any intention of stopping. He raised the wok and smashed it again and again. I said, "Don't ever stop. You didn't believe me. Do you believe me now?" Bu Fang smashed the black wok as he calmly said. Everyone was speechless, feeling sorry for Luo Li. Boom! The energy on Luo Li's body surged, and his eyes turned red. He was a little dumbfounded. His head was bleeding. However, his heart was like a sea of fire, and his anger surged. Rumble! A loud bang resounded. Xiao Bai and Xiaopi's figures fell from the sky, smashing hard on the ground. They were flung far away. The light that enveloped Xiaopi and Xiao Bai's bodies dissipated. Xiaopi's huge figure also became much smaller. She spat out bubbles, and her small eyes rolled around. "Other than this prawn and the iron puppet, what other tricks do you have?" A deafening voice resounded. In the void of the Soul Sea, the Supreme Blade Tyrant's figure stood proudly. In the Soul Sea space, the strong one was still the Supreme Blade Tyrant. Luo Li laughed crazily. His head was full of blood. Although he was unexpectedly smashed by Bu Fang, he was, after all, an existence at the peak of the divine physique echelon. His physical body was incomparably strong. He only stared crazily at Bu Fang, laughing crazily. Bu Fang solemnly turned his head to look at the Supreme Blade Tyrant. Xiaopi and Xiao Bai had both returned to his side. Xiao Bai's eyes twinkled. The energy in his body rumbled, and he planned to attack again. "It's useless. In this Supreme Soul Sea space, this Supreme is God. No one can come and save you. Just obediently feel the aura of death." The Supreme Blade Tyrant waved his palm. Blade energy filled the air, smashing Xiao Bai onto the ground once again. In the Soul Sea space, he, the Supreme Blade Tyrant, was indeed the controller. The Soul Sea was like a domain. No one could come and save Bu Fang. Feeling the killing intent from the Supreme Blade Tyrant's body, everyone sucked in a deep breath. Everyone took a deep breath. They knew that this time, Bu Fang would not be able to escape death. In the end, his struggle was still unable to resist the tyranny of the Supreme Blade Tyrant. The blade energy that filled the sky gathered, turning into a huge blade that covered the sky and covered the sun. That huge blade was as white as jade. Carrying a terrifying pressure, it slowly chopped down towards Bu Fang. Rip! Bu Fang narrowed his eyes. Xiao Bai blocked in front of him. However, at this moment, the space beside Bu Fang's body suddenly trembled. A white palm stretched out from the void, slowly tearing a gap. Pulling the gap to the 2 sides, a blurry figure appeared from the gap, slowly walking out. This figure just happened to appear below the position where the blade energy chopped down. Everyone was a little dumbfounded by the sudden appearance of the figure. Just as that figure walked out of the torn space, he suddenly turned his head. Feeling the blade energy that was chopping down, he was slightly stunned. In the next instant, he raised his white palm, flicking his finger. Ding! It was as if the space had frozen. That unparalleled, world-destroying blade energy seemed to be frozen in ice, stiffening in mid-air. The figure's gaze sized up this blade energy suspiciously, letting out a low sneer, "Poochie." In the next instant, with a flick of his finger, the entire blade energy was like broken glass, shattering into pieces. The blade energy dissipated. Incomparably tyrannical, world-destroying blade, dispersed just like that. Everyone was dumbfounded. Even Bu Fang was a little confused and speechless. The Supreme Blade Tyrant felt a burning pain on his face. Just as he finished saying that no one could step into his Soul Sea space to save Bu Fang, in the next instant, a figure appeared, flicking his finger and dispersing his blade energy, saving Bufang from a situation of certain death. What face-slapping! Did he have to be so professional? Oh, this little blade energy is not bad, but it's a pity it's a little lacking. That figure smiled warmly, his voice full of magnetism, as if there was a hint of temptation. In the next instant, smoke and dust filled the air, and that figure gradually became clear. Hiss, 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 however, when everyone saw the figure's face clearly, they sucked in a breath of cold air. Because what appeared in front of them was simply a perfect man, handsome and tall, incomparably handsome. It was not the kind of flirtatious handsomeness, but the kind of true masculinity and handsomeness. He wore a white robe, flawless and flawless. The strong wind blew, blowing the man's jet-black hair, causing it to flutter. The man turned his head to look at Bufang, his face carrying a smile, causing people to be mesmerized. "Who are you?" The Supreme Blade Tyrant's eyes narrowed as he coldly asked. The man still had a smile on his face, turning his head to look at the Supreme Blade Tyrant. Looking at the blurry figure of the Supreme Blade Tyrant, he indifferently smiled. "A remnant soul? Really mischievous. In the future, follow me by my side. It's quite rare to see a remnant soul with a soul sea in the netherworld," the man said with a smile. He did not put the Supreme Blade Tyrant in his eyes at all. After saying that, he continued to look at Bufang, his gaze dark and deep. "Hello, I feel a familiar aura from your body. I think you should have met a beautiful woman with black hair and black eyes, right? You guys usually call her the Netherworld Woman," the man said. Bufang furrowed his brows, looking at the man in front of him who was a little too handsome, the corner of his mouth twitching. Towards men who were more handsome than him, Bufang did not have any good impressions. Especially this person, who was especially flashy. However, the man's words made Bufang's heart slightly alert. "Netherworld woman? I don't know her. Also, who are you?" Bufang asked expressionlessly. Hiss, hiss, hiss. In the man's eyes, there was a faint black aura surrounding Bufang's body. That black aura was the aura of the curse. And the aura of the curse. Only the Netherworld woman in the secret realm had it. "So mischievous. But the way you lie is very cute." The handsome man's eyes narrowed, as if a flower was blooming. "Your question is very interesting. Who am I? I am the person who banished the Netherworld woman. People usually call me the Lord of the Netherworld, Hades." Chapter 587. When the man said those words, his gaze was extremely deep. His handsome face was slightly raised, presenting a tricky angle. The melancholy on his face was displayed to the fullest. He was very satisfied with his current state. That was the feeling of a lonely expert. However, Bufang looked at this man as if he was looking at an idiot. The Hades who banished the Netherworld woman? So this showy man in front of him was the one who threw you into the secret territory to starve? Are you surprised? Don't worry, I won't hurt you. The condition is that you bring me to the Netherworld woman. Her exile period has not ended, so she can't leave the secret territory so easily, Hades said with a light smile. In the distance, the Supreme Blade Tyrant, who was floating in the air, felt a little confused. This showy man who suddenly appeared, after destroying his blade energy with a finger, he actually said that he wanted to take him in as a follower. Damn it! This was the first time the Supreme Blade Tyrant had met such a showy person. When he, the Supreme Blade Tyrant, was still alive, he was someone who dared to raise the Slaughter God blade and slash at divine beasts. Even though he was dead now, he was not someone that could be easily subdued by any Tom, Dick, or Harry. The Lord of the Netherworld. Everyone called him Hades? Damn Hades, did he really think that he, the Supreme Blade Tyrant, was uneducated? It was impossible for the Lord of the Netherworld to leave the Netherworld, so how could he appear in the Heaven's secret territory? This pretentiousness was not even a little more fresh and refined. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's face was like a dog's at that moment. Seeing that the man was ignoring him, The anger in his heart surged. Even though he was a remnant soul, he was a remnant soul with dignity. The Shura Saintess and Wenrincho stared at the sudden change in the scene with their mouths agape. This handsome man who suddenly appeared attracted the attention of everyone present. They naturally heard the man's words. Hades? The two of them were shocked. As a traveler of the Valley of Gluttony, Wenrincho had naturally read the ancient records of the Valley of Gluttony. He was no stranger to the name Hades. Hades, also known as the Lord of the Netherworld, was an old monster who had lived for many years. His power was unfathomable, and he controlled the entire Netherworld. The Netherworld was a mysterious area. It was said that there were countless experts in that area. There were only a few records about the Netherworld in the Hidden Dragon continent. This handsome man in front of her actually called himself Hell King? An old monster that had lived for countless years? This was simply putting his life on the line. In my soul sea space, there are actually so many people who dare to be so impudent. Do you really think that I, the Supreme Blade Tyrant, am someone you can bully so easily? In the void, the roar of the Supreme Blade Tyrant could be heard. His body shone brilliantly as he pushed his energy to the limit. He was truly enraged. The man's words deeply provoked him and made him feel humiliated. Buzz. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's figure disappeared in an instant. In the next instant, he suddenly appeared in front of the handsome man. Countless blade energy spread out from his back, as though it was going to mince everything. Die. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's eyes widened in anger as he roared. A fist, sweeping up countless blade energy, smashing down. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. The energy of the entire soul sea space was drawn out. This Supreme Blade Tyrant was really using all his strength. This kind of power, even a true divine soul realm expert would not be able to withstand it. Boom! A huge explosion resounded, and the terrifying blade energy spread out in all directions. The entire soul sea space became dark at this moment. It was obvious that this attack made the Supreme Blade Tyrant almost draw out the energy of the soul sea. However, after a long time, a wave of light shone from the place where the explosion occurred. In the next instant, the light shone, and everyone could clearly see the scene there. Everyone's eyes slowly shrank, and a dazed expression appeared on their faces. Their mouths were wide open. Unbelievable! That handsome man was not injured at all. That man used a white and slender finger to block the Supreme Blade Tyrant's fist. It was as light as the wind and clouds, and a smile still hung on his face. Simply terrifying. At this moment, the Supreme Blade Tyrant's heart was only left in a daze, because only he was clear about the terrifying scene that happened within the huge explosion just now. That finger, unstoppable, broke through all of his blade energy, landing on his fist. Countless streams of saber chi bombarded the man's body, but they couldn't even tear through the man's clothes. This man who dared to call himself Hades. Exactly what kind of existence was he? Hades narrowed his eyes, and on his handsome face, a gentle smile appeared. Naughty. It's not easy for a remnant soul to remain in the soul sea. The energy of the soul sea is actually wasted like this. I told you to obediently follow me, but you still dared to make a move against me. You have to be punished, the man said with a smile. However, the Supreme Blade Tyrant's entire body was cold. Naughty. Naughty your sister. That man's smile, in the eyes of the Supreme Blade Tyrant, was like a nightmare. In the next instant, the man's other hand waved, and instantly, a pitch-black chain floated up, wrapping around the Supreme Blade Tyrant. This thing is called the Soul Binding Chain. In the Netherworld, it is specially used to bind the remnant souls that have gathered from the various continents. Oh, I rarely use it. Don't worry, it shouldn't be too painful, the man said with a smile. However, just as his words landed, the black chain locked onto the Supreme Blade Tyrant's body. It was as if there was lightning bursting out from the Supreme Blade Tyrant's body. The Supreme Blade Tyrant's eyes became blood-red, and he let out a miserable howl that made everyone's hair stand on end. Liar. Didn't he say that it wouldn't hurt? The Supreme Blade Tyrant really wanted to use a mouthful of blade energy to kill this man. The man seemed to be a little embarrassed. Maybe the way I opened it is wrong. Just bear with it for a while. Was this person a clown that the black dog invited? Bufang looked at the handsome man who had an awkward face as he touched his head, and he could not help but be a little speechless. The man locked onto the Supreme Blade Tyrant, and with one hand, he formed a seal. In the next instant, the Supreme Blade Tyrant's remnant soul turned into a ray of light, and it entered the man's hand. The miserable howl disappeared. This way it's much quieter, the man said. In the distance, the Shura Saintess, Wenrincho, and the rest were all dumbstruck. Oh, it's your turn. Shouldn't you tell me where the Netherworld woman is? Don't be naughty, Hades said. Rumble. Because the Supreme Blade Tyrant's remnant soul was absorbed, the entire Soul Sea space lost its backbone, and it started to collapse. Turbulent energy was being released, and it seemed as if it was going to explode. The Shura Saintess and the rest's faces instantly turned pale. Once this energy exploded, how could they survive? That was the soul sea of an expert at the peak of the divine soul realm. If it exploded, let alone them, even experts at the divine soul realm would be afraid. Wenrencho's heart was in pain. He had not received the inheritance of the Supreme Blade Tyrant. Where was the promised inheritance? How did it disappear just like that? Bufang furrowed his brows, and he turned his head to look at his surroundings. Hades also raised his head, and his gaze was deep. What a pity this soul sea space collapsed just like that. Forget it, finding the Netherworld woman is more important. Follow me out. The man said indifferently, and he casually waved his hand. A pitch-black light gushed out from his hand. In the next instant it enveloped everyone in the soul sea space. Buzz, everyone felt their eyes blur, and when they regained their senses, they realized that they had already appeared on flat ground. The sun was shining brightly in the sky, and the surrounding trees were lush. Did they return to the heaven's secret territory? Suddenly, everyone's hairs stood on end, and they raised their heads to look in a direction in the sky. There, a pitch-black wooden ship swayed from afar, and it was neither fast nor slow. A terrifying aura spread out from the Netherworld ship. At the bow of the wooden ship, a graceful figure stood. Her black dress fluttered in the wind as the black wooden ship moved. Yu's eyes had completely turned pitch-black, and her long black hair that reached her waist swayed in the wind. Her white skin was like jade, emitting a luster. Netherworld woman? The Shura Saintess and the rest were stunned, and they sucked in a deep breath. Bufang was also stunned, and he looked at Yu, who was standing on the Netherworld ship, with a puzzled expression. The handsome man's lips curled into a smile, and he looked in the direction of the Netherworld ship with a doting gaze. Under the gaze of tens of thousands of people, the Netherworld ship stopped in the sky above them. Oh, this time, I don't need you to tell me. The Netherworld woman directly appeared, which saves me a lot of trouble. Hades smiled. Old man, let him go. You stood barefooted on the deck of the Netherworld ship, and she looked down at the handsome man. Her pitch-black eyes turned and landed on Bufang's body, and she pointed at Bufang coldly. Bufang was stunned. Hades was also stunned. In the next instant, the corners of Hades's mouth curled up, and he said, "Naughty girl, you've really learned bad things." After Hades finished speaking, he took a step forward, and he appeared on the Netherworld ship as if he had teleported. The moment his foot landed on the Netherworld ship, the ship seemed to be unable to bear the weight, and it fell with a loud bang, smashing into the ground. Yu expressionlessly looked at Hades. Girl, your complexion has become quite good. Your vitality is quite vigorous, and it seems like you've been living a good life recently. Hades was surprised, and he looked at Yu's expressionless face as he said this. Old man, how can you leave the Netherworld? The Netherworld woman stared at Hades, and she asked, enunciating every word. Naughty, don't call me old. Have you ever seen an old man as handsome as me? I'm Hades. Isn't it easy for me to leave the netherworld? Hades said. You calmly looked at him, and she said, You're really as shameless as what Lord Go said. Hades was stunned and he said, Lord Go? What Lord Go? Bufang looked at the two of them chatting, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He looked at you, and he couldn't understand why you were here. Moreover, you and Hades's meeting seemed to be different from what he had imagined. Wasn't Hades here to capture you and bring her back to suffer? Are all the spicy strips sold out? Bufang thought for a moment, and he decided to ask an important question. Yu's body trembled, and her pitch-black eyes focused. She turned her head to look at Bufang, and she solemnly nodded her head. All sold out. After getting Yu's confirmation, Bufang was very satisfied. Then you guys can continue chatting. I still have something to do, Bufang said. In the next moment, Bufang patted Xiao Bai's plump belly, and he turned around, intending to leave. Since Hades wasn't here to cause trouble, he was in a hurry to find the true dragon fruit. He needed to complete the system's mission first, and he could only return to his business after completing it. When the Shura Saintess and the others saw this scene, they quietly retreated into the distance. Hades didn't really care about these things. At this moment, what he cared about was the Lord Go that the Netherworld woman mentioned. Oh, and the spicy strip. He didn't know what the spicy strip was, but he felt that it was awesome. There was also the Lord Go. He felt that the Lord Go that the Netherworld woman mentioned was an extraordinary existence. If the Netherworld woman called him Lord Go, he must be really awesome. Didn't you see how she called him old man? Wait a minute, Hades suddenly froze. The Lord Go, the Lord Dog that the Netherworld woman was talking about, could it be that shameless dog? Chapter 588. Xiao Bai blindly followed behind Bufang. The shadow of a human and a puppet stretched out under the sunlight. Bufang wanted to find the true dragon fruit. Only by finding the true dragon fruit would the system's mission be considered completed. Thus, Bufang was too lazy to care about Hades and Yu. From the way Hades treated Yu, he should be very friendly. Since he was friendly, there was no need for him to get involved. He just had to do his own thing. However, Bufang still had some doubts in his heart. According to common sense, an existence like Hades should be high and mighty. Why would he appear here? What was the reason for Hades to appear here? After hearing Yu's words, Hades's face became extremely solemn. He stared at Yu seriously and said, Tell me, the dog you mentioned, is it really that shameless mangy dog? Nethery was slightly taken aback. What shameless mangy dog? Although the Lord Go was a little fatter and a little lazy, he still had his principles. There shouldn't be any relationship between him and a mangy dog, right? Too lazy to care about Hades, you saw that Bufang's figure was actually getting further and further away. Gradually, she became anxious. Thus, you did not reply to Hades's words. She controlled the Netherworld ship and chased after Bufang. The Shura Saintess and the others had already fled in a sorry state. In the secret realm, the Netherworld woman's battle prowess was definitely not something they could contend against. In the outside world, the Shura Saintess could be evenly matched with the Netherworld woman. That was because the Netherworld woman had a curse on her body. Her cultivation was less than a tenth of her original strength, and it was difficult for her to use it. However, in the secret realm, she was as strong as the Supreme Blade Tyrant in the Soul Sea space. When Rincho, who was dressed in cloth, narrowed his eyes as he watched the Netherworld ship break through the sky. Hades and the Netherworld woman, who were on the Netherworld ship, were deeply reflected in his eyes. The Netherworld woman and a man who calls himself Hades. Could he really be related to the Netherworld? When Rincho took a deep breath, suddenly, the corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a meaningful smile. It's good that the Hidden Dragon Royal Court cares a lot about the Netherworld. I think they will be very interested in such an important piece of news. when Rincho looked at Bufang's gradually disappearing figure. A creepy smile hung on his face as he gradually disappeared into the darkness. You haven't answered my question. Hades felt that the Netherworld woman's wings had grown strong. She didn't even answer his question, which made him feel somewhat sad. Although the Netherworld woman wasn't very respectful to him in the past, she would at least answer his questions. But now, she even knew how to roll her eyes at him. No matter what, he was the lord of the Netherworld, Hades' era. In the Netherworld, he was the supreme existence. You've definitely been led astray by that mangy dog. You've become mischievous, Hades said with certainty. You rolled her eyes. She was too lazy to care about Hades, who was nagging at the side. The Netherworld ship whizzed through the Heaven's secret territory. Soon, it saw the figures of Bufang and Xiao Bai. Bringing along a gust of wind, the Netherworld ship descended. The red and white vermilion robe on Bufang's body fluttered under the howling wind. He raised his head, and the wind messed up his hair. Yu's tall figure jumped down from the Netherworld ship, floating beside Bufang. Bufang was slightly stunned, looking at Yu in confusion. What's wrong? Nethery's long black hair fell to her waist, and her black dress fluttered in the wind, showing off her tall and slender figure. Her pitch-black eyes looked straight at Bufang. Hades' era was lying on the Netherworld ship. He stretched out his head, looking at Yu with a face full of gossip. This posture. Could it be that something ambiguous was about to happen? Oh my God! The Netherworld woman had really learned bad things from that mangy dog. As Hades, he should go and stop him. But why was there a faint sense of anticipation in his heart? Hades blinked his eyes. Yu's long eyelashes trembled. Her sparkling feet touched the ground, and she stood in front of Bufang. Her red lips opened slightly as she said, "Bufang, I'm hungry." Bufang nodded his head in understanding. "Wait for me to go back. I'll make you dragon blood rice." After saying that, Bufang turned around, intending to continue walking. "I want to eat it now." Yu's figure flickered, and she appeared in front of Bufang like a ghost. Bufang furrowed his brows. "Did you come all the way from the restaurant to the secret realm just to find me to cook dragon blood rice?" Yu nodded her head expressionlessly. Bufang curled his lips. This gluttonous Netherworld woman. Suddenly, Bufang seemed to have thought of something. He looked at Yu suspiciously and asked, "Did you really sell all of the spicy strips?" Yu was taken aback, but she nodded her head solemnly. Bufang couldn't help but let go of the doubts in his heart when he saw the confident look on his face. "Fine. Follow me for now. Wait until I find the true dragon fruit, then I'll cook dragon blood rice for you." Bufang raised his hand and patted the Netherworld woman's head. After saying that, he waved his hand, and a red spicy strip appeared. The spicy aroma of the spicy strip permeated the air. "Oh, take a spicy strip to satisfy your craving." Yu received the spicy strip from Bufang's hand with a dumbfounded expression. When she looked at the spicy strip, her complexion darkened. It was the spicy strip again. She had already eaten enough of it. She really missed the taste of dragon blood rice. What's this?" Hades asked curiously. He had already appeared beside Yu. He clasped his hands behind his back and stuck his head out. He stared at the spicy strip in Yu's hand curiously. "It's Bufang's dish, the spicy strip," Yu said as she glanced at Hades. "This thing? It's food? I can smell an abyssal aura from it." Hades's eyes lit up. When the Netherworld woman saw Hades's expression, she handed the spicy strip to him and said, "Eat it." A gentle smile appeared on the Nether King's handsome face. Not bad, the Netherworld woman knew how to show filial respect to the Nether King. It seemed like the influence of that mangy dog on the Netherworld woman wasn't as big as he had imagined. After stuffing the spicy strip into Hades's hand, Yu strode forward and chased after Bufang. The smile on Hades's face gradually disappeared. His nostrils widened as he moved closer to the spicy strip and sniffed it. A fiery aroma instantly entered his nostrils, and all the pores on his body slightly widened. It was as though dense essence energy was gushing out of his body. It really is the abyssal aura. Although it isn't very dense, it is still incredible. I can actually sense the abyssal aura in the hidden dragon continent. TSK, TSK, TSK. What is the origin of this chef? The corners of Hades's mouth curled up into a pensive smile. In the end, he opened his mouth wide and stuffed the spicy strip into his mouth. However, he didn't bite it. Instead, he slowly pulled out the spicy strip and sucked it. As he slowly pulled it out, the expression on Hades's face continuously changed. Delicious. It flawlessly blends the spicy taste and the sweet taste together, giving people an indescribable feeling. The aroma of the abyssal chili is so strong that people are reluctant to part with it. Is this the delicacy of the hidden dragon continent? Hades was astonished. This was the first time he had eaten such a unique delicacy. The taste was extremely peculiar, and it was as though it wanted to be deeply engraved in the depths of his mind. It was unforgettable, especially the taste of the abyssal chili. Munch munch. After sucking it once, Hades started to bite it. As he chewed, his eyes slightly narrowed. Jiang Ling landed while gasping for breath. That familiar and revered figure in the distance caused her eyes to light up. I finally found that lord. Jiang Ling was incomparably excited. Her teacher said that as long as she released this lord and passed the jade talisman to him, she would be able to obtain a great opportunity. Moreover, the other party would also give her the thing that her teacher wanted. However, what she didn't expect was that once the other party appeared, after saying a few words to her, he immediately disappeared. He didn't even give her the chance to take out the jade talisman. For the opportunity, Jiang Ling naturally wouldn't give up. Thus, she searched all the way and finally found this lord. However, this lord's current state seemed a little strange. Jiang Ling walked closer and saw that incomparably handsome lord squinting his eyes. His face was filled with enjoyment. In his hand there was a familiar thing that he was holding and he was continuously chewing on it. That expression was a little wretched. Lord, what are you doing? Jiang Ling had a dumbfounded look on her face. Hades held a spicy strip in his hand. He circled his lips and sucked on the flavor of the spicy strip. His eyebrows moved up and down, and his face was filled with enjoyment. Jiang Ling looked at him with goosebumps all over her body. So this lord was actually a pervert? Also, wasn't that thing the spicy strip cooked by Bufang? Back then, she lost to this spicy strip, so she was very clear about it. Finally, Hades finished the entire spicy strip. His lips were red and his face was flushed red. As if he had finally discovered Jiang Ling, Hades squinted his eyes and drew back his red lips. He said, "It's you. Thank you for summoning me over." Jiang Ling's face was filled with cold sweat. She hurriedly took out a black jade talisman and passed it to Hades. Lord, this is what my teacher wanted me to pass to you. Hades was stunned. He received the jade talisman and in the next instant, he smiled. So you're that guy's descendant. All right, I will fulfill my promise. Follow me first. I have something important to do now. Hearing Hades's promise, Jiang Ling's heart instantly became excited, as though it was going to jump out of her chest. Lord was actually going to do something important. Furthermore, he was going to bring her along. How exciting! Hades smiled. With a wave of his hand, the two of them instantly disappeared. After a while, Jiang Ling's face was filled with speechlessness as she looked at Hades's smiling face beside Bufang. Was this the F***king important matter that Lord was talking about? Just to eat another spicy strip? Teacher, is this really the Lord that you are looking for? I feel that he is a little unreliable. Jiang Ling's face was filled with confusion. Bufang expressionlessly looked at Hades, who was smiling at him. That Hades's mouth was red and swollen, and his eyes were slightly shining. Bufang turned his head to look at you. It was obvious that you had given the spicy strip to Hades to eat. Wait, you actually gave food to someone else? Oh my God, this is unbelievable. This little brother, do you still have more of that magical delicacy? Can you give I another one? Hades said. Another spicy strip? Bufang rubbed his chin, glanced at Hades, and indifferently said, Another spicy strip. Of course I can, one for 10,000 crystals. I am honest with you. Jiang Ling's face twitched. You also blinked her eyes. The smile on Hades's face became even wider. How mischievous. How can this kind of delicacy be measured by crystals? You must treat it with sincerity. Talking about money is an insult to delicacies. Bufang looked at him expressionlessly. Please speak human words. Hades pursed his lips, swallowed his saliva, and turned his head to look at you. Lass, lend I some crystals. I was in a hurry to go out, so I haven't exchanged them yet. Chapter 589. The currency exchange in the Netherworld was different from that in the Hidden Dragon continent. After all, the two regions had different civilizations. Crystals were the common currency in the Hidden Dragon continent, but in the Netherworld, it did not work. Hades himself did not expect that he would need to spend crystals to come to the Hidden Dragon continent. The atmosphere became extremely awkward. Hades looked at you with a pout, as though he wanted to use his charming eyes to move you. However, he was quickly disappointed. You did not have any expression on her face. She was extremely cold. She did not seem to be moved by Hades's big watery eyes. She looked at the latter as though she was looking at a piece of wood that could talk. What is a crystal? Can it be eaten? You asked. Hades grinned and looked at Bufang with dissatisfaction. You are very mischievous. Why does this lass not need to pay crystals to eat, but I do? Are you jealous that I am more handsome than you? Jiang Ling, who was far away, twitched her mouth. Was this really the lord that teacher had been looking for? Such a shameless existence. Bufang and you were both expressionless. However, Bufang's gaze towards Hades was much more lively. At least, it was not looking at a piece of wood. 15,000 crystals for one spicy strip. Bufang raised a finger and said seriously to Hades. Hades sucked in a breath of cold air. This young man actually raised the price. How could there be such a shameless person in this world? You are definitely jealous of my handsome appearance, Hades said seriously. 20,000 crystals for one. Bufang raised another finger. Hades's heart was trembling. He looked at you, then at Bufang. His face was filled with despair. You? How could you treat such a handsome man like this? You will not find true love like this, Hades said bitterly. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched, and he raised another finger. Jiang Ling, who was far away, could not bear to watch any longer. Say, Master, I have crystals here. I can lend them to you. Jiang Ling said. Hades's eyes lit up and he looked at Jiang Ling with satisfaction. Little girl, you know how to appreciate beauty. You have a bright future ahead of you. Hades smiled warmly. My lord, I'm just lending it to you. You have to remember to return it. Jiang Ling felt that she still had to remind this shameless man. Otherwise, her 2 crystals would be like throwing a meat bun at a dog and would never return. If that happened, she would really have to cry on the toilet wall. The Nether King patted his chest loudly. He gave Jiang Ling a firm promise that he would definitely return the money. Only then did Jiang Ling pass the 2 crystals to him. Bufang took the 20,000 crystals and looked at Hades as if he was looking at an idiot. He then took out a spicy chili strip from the system's storage space and gave it to Hades. Hades happily took the chili strip and sniffed the rich spicy aroma that spread from the chili strip. His face was filled with infatuation. In the next instant, under everyone's stunned gazes, he opened his mouth and stuffed the chili strip into his mouth, continuously sucking. Bufang looked on in shock. So, the chili strip could be eaten like this? But why did this posture look so stupid? Yu's face was indifferent. Not bad. The taste is really not bad. It's simply godly, too delicious. The spiciness of the abyss and the fragrance perfectly combined together. The feeling of rushing up the throat made I think of I's youth. Hades squinted his eyes and sucked in infatuation. Bufang, who was a little speechless towards Hades, turned around and continued walking. This time, the system's mission was to find the true dragon fruit in the heaven's secret territory. And after finding the true dragon fruit, he still needed to complete the promotion recipe, the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. This was not a small difficulty. As a promotion dish, the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup was a test for Bufang after he successfully stepped into the divine physique echelon. Only by completing the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup would he have the chance to continue advancing. If Bufang wanted his strength to increase, this mission must be completed. I need to find an ingredient called the true dragon fruit. If you guys want to follow me, then come along, Bufang said. After saying that, he continued walking. Xiao Bai blindly followed behind him. Yu's long eyelashes fluttered and she also followed. Once Hades saw that Yu had left, he naturally would not stay at the same spot. While sucking on the chili strip, he also followed. As for Jiangling, she still remembered her 20,000 crystals, so she followed closely behind the Nether King. Thus, this group of people slowly walked in the Heaven's Secret Territory. The Heaven's Secret Territory was extremely huge and incomparably vast. Surrounding it were undulating mountain ranges. Wanting to find the true dragon fruit was indeed a little difficult. After walking for a while, the scorching sun in the sky emitted an extremely high temperature. It made everyone feel a burst of dryness in their mouth. Hades happily stuffed the last bit of the chili strip that was the size of a fingernail into his mouth. As he chewed, he looked at Bufang with a puzzled expression. Young man, if you want to find a heaven treasure, then let you help. In the secret territory, what kind of heaven treasure would she not know? Bufang was stunned. Other than eating, you also had this function? It was a little unexpected. You stood on the deck of the Netherworld ship. The wind whistled past, causing the black dress on her body to flutter. She looked at Bufang and expressionlessly said, "In finding heaven treasure in the secret territory, if I claim to be number 2, no one would dare to claim to be number 1. You was very confident. Then why didn't you say so earlier?" Bufang rolled his eyes. "You didn't ask either," you lightly replied. "Help me find the true dragon fruit. When we go back, I'll give you more food. Increase the amount of dragon blood rice," Bufang said. Yu's eyes instantly lit up. She pouted her cute lips, which was too beautiful to behold. "The true dragon fruit is in that direction. Follow me." Yu happily pouted her lips, but immediately became serious. She raised her jade-like arm and pointed in a direction. In the next instant, she controlled the Netherworld ship and sped in that direction. Bufang's heart shuddered. True energy also burst out. His feet stepped on the winding mountain road, following the Netherworld ship. Xiao Bai's running was more domineering. Everywhere he passed, the trees were all smashed into pieces by his fan-like hands. Hades lazily strode forward. Every step he took was incomparably leisurely. However, his speed did not decrease in the slightest. He unhurriedly followed behind Bufang. Jiangling's heart surged. This kind of method was indeed extraordinary. Although this Hades was a little shameless, his ability was really strong. Looks like following him was the right choice. Bufang's group of people had a huge momentum, attracting the attention of countless people. There were many people in the Heaven's Secret Territory. After all, there were countless opportunities in this secret territory. Many people wandered around in search of opportunities. Many people were curious about what Bufang and his group were doing. Hence, they also secretly followed behind the group. In just a short while, the entire group's momentum grew. "Brothers, what are they doing? Why are there so many people?" I don't know. I saw that there were so many people, so I joined in. With such a huge momentum, they must be going to find something good. We can't go wrong by following them. Fishing in troubled waters, understand? With so many people in a group, how could their goal be something ordinary? A group of clueless onlookers followed behind a group of people. Hence, a vast and long group leisurely moved forward. This kind of power caused many spirit beasts in the heaven's secret territory to be scared to the point of crawling. Along the way, Bufang's group actually did not meet with any big obstacles. It was really miraculous. Rumble. Suddenly, a deafening sound rang in everyone's ears. That was the sound of a waterfall violently crashing down, like the sound of thunder exploding. Had they arrived? Everyone was shocked. In the next moment, they continued to move forward. They realized that in front of them, there was an extremely remote valley. At the entrance of the valley, there were strange rocks, and the road condition was very bad. However, the crowd did not give up. Many people also followed Bufang and his group, climbing into the valley. Once they entered the valley, everyone was stunned. Because the scene in the valley was a completely different world. Too beautiful to behold. The waterfall sparkled under the sunlight. The splashes of water that smashed onto the rocks were filled with spiritual energy and filled with a hazy mist. A beautiful rainbow appeared above the waterfall in a semicircle. This was actually a heavenly paradise. Everyone was stunned. Many people even sucked in a breath of cold air. A heavenly paradise was not only a place with dense spiritual energy, but it also had many precious treasures. However, the most important point was that a heavenly paradise was very suitable for burial. There were many heavenly paradises in the heaven's secret territory, but most of them had already been excavated. The heavenly paradise in front of them was completely unknown to everyone. This also meant that this heavenly paradise was a new heavenly paradise. That meant that the treasures inside had yet to be excavated. There were even some inheritances left behind by experts. After all, as a burial ground, there would definitely be inheritances. Some people went crazy, roaring as they charged towards the heavenly paradise. In an instant, the entire valley was in an uproar. "Why aren't you going?" Hades looked at the incomparably calm Bufang and asked curiously. Those people's craziness and Bufang's calmness formed a stark contrast. No rush. Bufang stood on a rock. As the waterfall smashed down, it raised a strong gust of wind and water vapor, causing the vermilion robe on his body to flutter. Hades smiled warmly. "Luckily, you're able to keep your composure. Otherwise, you would already be in danger." And? Bufang was stunned. "Since this last brought us here, it means that there is definitely a true dragon fruit here. Since there is a true dragon fruit, there will definitely be a dragonification tree. And if there is a dragonification tree, it means that there is a dragon corpse buried here. Although the dragon buried in this broken heaven's secret territory is definitely not a true dragon, to be able to nurture a true dragon fruit, it definitely has the bloodline of the dragon race." The corner of Hades's mouth curled up as he said, "And even if a dragon corpse with the bloodline of the dragon race is dead, the guardian spirit beast that it nurtures is not something that you ants can resist." Just as Hades's words fell, the entire valley began to tremble. In the next instant, the bottom of the waterfall suddenly exploded, and a black shadow fiercely flew out from the pool. Its pitch-black scales shone with a cold light under the sunlight. Its long and narrow body wriggled up, and its roar carried a monstrous stench. This was actually a black flood dragon. Poochie! The black flood dragon went berserk. With a swing of its tail, it caused the bodies of several experts to explode. Fresh blood splattered all over the ground. Within the pool there was a bubbling sound. A malevolent-looking black branch that was like a horned dragon slowly rose up. And on that branch, there were 3 black-colored fruits that shone with brilliance. True dragon fruit. Bufang's eyes lit up, and his heart was filled with excitement. That black-colored fruit was the purpose of his trip, the true dragon fruit. It was also an extremely important ingredient in the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. TSK, 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 look at this mischievous black flood dragon. How strong is it? Young man, do you need me, Hades, to make a move? I only need a chili strip. Hades raised his head 45 degrees, and his deep gaze solemnly said to Bufang. Chapter 590. When Hades said those words, his face didn't blush, and his heart didn't skip a beat. He thought that Bufang would definitely agree to let him take action. This black flood dragon was really hot-tempered. Its body, which was covered with black scales, swayed, raising giant waves that reached the sky. A terrifying aura spread out, making people feel extremely pressured. Many experts were smashed by the black flood dragon's sharp tail, and their bodies were smashed, turning into flesh and blood that scattered in the sky. In this kind of frightening scene, Hades thought that this young man, Bufang, would definitely be a little scared. One chili strip. You definitely won't lose anything, Hades said seriously. However, when Bufang heard Hades's words, he turned his head to look at him with a strange face. Why do I need you to take action? Bufang asked casually. A moment later, Xiao Bai's purple eyes, which were next to Bufang, flickered, turning ash-gray. A terrifying aura spread out from his body. With a clanging sound, the metal wings on Xiao Bai's back opened. They covered the sky, incomparably domineering. Hades was bewildered. Xiao Bai's body sprinted out like a spring, dashing toward the black flood dragon in the sky. Boom! Violent tremors resounded. The battle in the sky had completely begun. Xiao Bai's purple eyes were radiant. He fought with the black flood dragon. His fan-like big hand pressed the black flood dragon's head, starting to fiercely tear it apart. Facing the powerful black flood dragon, facing the murderous black flood dragon, Xiao Bai didn't retreat even a little bit. This puppet shocked many people. Xiao Opi lay on Bufang's shoulder, spitting out bubbles. His small eyes were round and round. You stood there elegantly. The gale from the falling waterfall fluttered her black dress. She looked very calm, as if she wasn't surprised at all. You see. Why do I need you to take action? You even wasted a chili strip, Bufang said. Hades was a little speechless. This puppet was indeed not ordinary. It was so strong that it collapsed. However, Hades was very unhappy. Because of the existence of this puppet, Bufang didn't even give him a single chili strip. That delicious spicy strip that was filled with the aura of the abyss. He couldn't taste it again. Sigh. Hades let out a long sigh, feeling helpless. You didn't even give me a single spicy strip. Hades's handsome face was filled with melancholy as he looked up at Bufang at a 45-degree angle. The eyes of several experts in the surroundings lit up when they saw that the black dragon was being held back by Xiao Bai. Their gazes landed on the dragon transformation tree in the middle of the waterfall before they stared at the true dragon fruit with greed in their eyes. The true dragon fruit on the dragonification tree was an extremely precious treasure. With a jolt in their hearts, they circulated their true energy and instantly charged towards the dragonification tree. With so many experts making their moves at the same time, the scene instantly became somewhat chaotic. When Hades saw this scene, he felt that his chance had come again. He looked at Bufang and the corners of his mouth curled up as he said, "Do you want I to make a move? If I make a move, I'm 90% sure that the true dragon fruit will definitely be yours. All you need is a chili strip." Bufang looked at Hades as though he was looking at a retard. Why would he waste a chili strip to let Hades make a move? The corners of Bufang's mouth curled up, and the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. With a flourish of the knife, Bufang's figure shot out, leaving Hades dumbfounded. Hades was incomparably resentful. As he looked at Bufang's back, a trace of melancholy appeared on his handsome face. Really naughty, not even giving me a chili strip. Boom. Around the dragonification tree, a dragon's roar resounded. When many experts approached the waterfall, the black flood dragon, which was entangled by Xiao Bai, suddenly became irritable. The scales on its body stood up, and its body broke free from Xiao Bai's restraint. With a roar, it brought about a gust of wind that swept past, forcing many experts to retreat. Some of them were even directly bombarded by the black flood dragon, causing them to be seriously injured. Among the experts present, the strongest one was only a supreme being who had broken through 4 supreme being shackles. Thus, many people were somewhat unwilling to accept this outcome. Pa, 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 pa. Bufang's true energy covered his feet, and he flew above the waterfall, causing the water to splash up into the sky. His gaze was fixated on the dragonification tree, looking at the true dragon fruit on the tree, and his face was expressionless. When some people saw Bufang make a move, they instantly revealed a playful expression. That puppet was very strong, but Bufang was very weak. A mere brat who had broken through one supreme being's shackle actually dared to be so impudent in front of the black flood dragon. Everyone just watched, feeling that Bufang would soon be torn to shreds by the furious black flood dragon. Hades, who did not have any chili strips to eat, felt somewhat depressed. He also felt that Bufang was really stingy. A chili strip could invite a big-shot expert like Hades to help him for free, but he actually rejected it. He chose to personally take action, and with a cultivation that had broken through one shackle, he faced the black flood dragon, who was at the peak of the divine physique echelon. Was that fellow's head stuffed with a chili strip? Youngsters nowadays are really naughty. Hades gloomily looked up at a 45-degree angle, shaking his head as he sighed. You stood on the netherworld ship, indifferently glancing at Hades. Then, she turned her head to look at Bufang, who was carrying a kitchen knife and rushing toward the black flood dragon. The black flood dragon roared, and the black scales on its neck stood up, shooting out fiercely. Bang! 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 They were like cannonballs exploding, and the entire waterfall was filled with towering waves. Bufang's face was calm, and his mental energy surged out. Through the Shura Tower's amplification, his figure moved at a rapid speed. Every time he moved, he dodged the scales that were shot out. His mental energy was extremely strong, and it was easy for him to do so. Xiao Bai spread his metal wings, and with a whistling sound, he descended from the sky, stepping on the black flood dragon's body. His ash-gray eyes were dazzling. In the next instant, the magic array on Xiao Bai's body surged. Boom! An explosion resounded, and the black flood dragon roared in pain. The magic array on Xiao Bai's body exploded, and the black flood dragon was smashed into the waterfall. The waves surged. Bufang sped through the waves, and he finally got close to the dragonification tree. The experts were all dumbfounded. No one would have thought that this kid, who had only broken through one of the Supreme Being's shackles, could actually dodge the black flood dragon's attack and get close to the dragonification tree. However, in the next instant, when everyone thought that the dust had settled under the dragonification tree, the waves surged. A malevolent mouth opened and the waves surged. The huge black flood dragon rushed out, and with a bang, it swallowed Bufang. Bufang furrowed his brows. He wanted to jump out of the black flood dragon's mouth, but the huge suction force made it impossible for him to escape. He could only watch as the dragonification tree disappeared in front of his eyes. His line of sight had also turned into darkness. This sudden turn of events caused many people to cry out in alarm. Some were horrified and some were gloating. A mere Supreme Being who had broken through one of the Supreme Being's shackles dared to face the Black Flood Dragon. They really didn't know if this kid was brave or brainless. Hades blinked his eyes, and he pointed at the Black Flood Dragon. He laughed and said, "I told you not to give me a single chili strip. Now you've been eaten." You furrowed her brows, and her black hair, which hung down to her waist, rose and fell. The black energy on her body also quietly spread out, and she was about to make a move. However, you seem to have thought of something, and she expressionlessly dispersed the energy on her body. I say, lass, do you think that if I make a move to save that youngster now, will he give me a chilly strip? Hades thought of a serious question, and he turned his head to ask you. You glanced at him indifferently. Make a guess. Hades rolled his eyes. This lass was becoming more and more aloof. However, according to that youngster's stingy character, he definitely wouldn't give a chilly strip. It seemed like he had to let this lass be a witness, in case that youngster turned hostile and refused to acknowledge his debt. If that happened, I would be at a disadvantage. There's no need. Bufang is fine, you said indifferently. Hades was stunned. He was swallowed by the Black Flood Dragon, and he was about to become the Black Flood Dragon's dung. How could he be fine? This lass was too confident in that youngster. Suddenly, Hades froze, and he turned his head to look. He saw that the Black Flood Dragon, which had been smashed into the water by Xiao Bai's fist, suddenly started to struggle violently. Its abdomen bulged, and it seemed as though there was a huge creature growing inside. Rip! In the next instant, a deafening dragon roar resounded. The Black Flood Dragon's abdomen was torn from the inside out. Fresh blood dripped, and a fishy smell filled the air. A huge black wok emerged from the Black Flood Dragon's abdomen. A shadow stood by the black wok, carrying a dazzling golden kitchen knife. Bufang's face was emotionless. True energy surged, and the vermilion robe on his body seemed to ripple, evaporating the flood dragon's blood. The deafening dragon roar came from the dragon bone kitchen knife. Facing this massive dragon might, the weak dragon bloodline in the Black Flood Dragon's body was instantly stimulated, and its body shivered. Xiao Bai's metal wings spread open. He landed, punching the Black Flood Dragon's head. The Black Flood Dragon's head was hit hard. A terrifying battle broke out, and energy wreaked havoc. After a while, everything returned to normal. Because the boiling energy evaporated the water, the surface of the waterfall was hazy. No one could see the scene inside. They didn't know what the result would be. However, many people's hearts were already trembling. The scene of Bufang carrying the kitchen knife and jumping out of the Black Flood Dragon's abdomen had completely shocked them. Swish! In the hazy mist, a huge figure slowly appeared. Soon, that figure became clear. Bufang, wearing the vermilion robe, stepped on the surface of the waterfall. He held a dragonification tree in one hand, and the other hand played with the pitch-black true dragon fruit. The dense spirit energy spread out, and Bufang was quite satisfied. Xiao Bai's chubby figure followed behind Bufang. Its metal wings had already been retracted, and its fan-like hand grabbed the Black Flood Dragon's tail, slowly dragging the Black Flood Dragon's lifeless body out. The Black Flood Dragon's scales cracked, and fresh blood dyed the waterfall red. This scene caused many people to be shocked. Walking back to the shore, Bufang's body didn't even have a drop of water on it. With a calm face, he flipped his hand and put the dragonification tree into the system-dimensional bag. He only left a true dragon fruit in his hand. As for the Black Flood Dragon's huge corpse, after Bufang sized it up, he nodded in satisfaction. It's a pretty good ingredient. I can make sweet and sour flood dragon ribs for Blackie when I get back. Patting the Black Flood Dragon's corpse, Bufang waved his hand, and the huge Black Flood Dragon's corpse disappeared. The people in the distance swallowed their saliva, looking at the true dragon fruit in Bufang's hand enviously. Some people's hearts were spinning, and they wanted to snatch it. However, when they saw Xiao Bai glaring at them like a tiger watching its prey, and Hades, whose face was full of melancholy, they gave up on the idea. Bufang returned to Yu's side, playing with the true dragon bone, and a satisfied expression appeared on his face. Hades looked at Bufang with hidden bitterness. You young man, you're so naughty. Why do you have to make things so complicated? It's just a chili strip, and I can help you settle it in minutes. It's just a Black Flood Dragon, and I can crush it with one finger. Bufang glanced at Hades, and the corners of his mouth curled up. A chili strip suddenly appeared in his hand, and under Hades's bright eyes, he stuffed it into his mouth. A chili strip costs 20,000 crystals. It's the real deal, and I don't cheat anyone. Do you want one? Bufang waved the chili strip in his hand and said calmly to Hades. Hades swallowed his saliva, and his handsome face was full of melancholy. You young man, you're really naughty. Chapter 591. Bufang rolled his eyes at Hades's words. Slowly stuffing the chili strip into his mouth, he chewed it unhurriedly. As the chili strip flowed into his stomach, it immediately released a dense amount of true energy. The true energy spread to his limbs and bones, causing him to feel much better from the feeling of weakness in his body. In the stomach of the black flood dragon, Bufang pushed his true energy to the limit. Only then was he able to cut open the black flood dragon's stomach. His current cultivation was still too weak. Almost all of the true energy in his dantian was used up before he could cut open the flood dragon's stomach. The taste of the chili strip was good, but the recovery effect was even better. However, this made Hades drool. Hades seemed to have a special liking for the chili strip. The aura of the deep abyss made him extremely intoxicated. However, Hades did not have money. He could only watch as Bufang slowly ate the chili strip. He even licked the remaining spicy juice from the corner of his mouth. Gulp. Hades felt as if there was a small hand constantly scratching his heart, making it difficult for him to endure. He turned his head to look at Jiangling. Jiangling was stunned. Her body instantly tensed up and she stared at Hades with extreme vigilance. Your Excellency, don't even think about it. You still owe me 20,000 crystals, Jiangling said. A hint of melancholy appeared on Hades's handsome face. You youngster, you are really calculative. I didn't say that I won't return it to you. It seemed that borrowing crystals from Jiangling would not work. However, Hades did not give up. He turned his head to look at you. What are you looking at? I don't need crystals to eat the chili strip, you said calmly. Hades instantly felt as if an invisible arrow had pierced through his heart. It made him so upset that he wanted to vomit blood. Rumble! Suddenly, the ground started to shake. The pool of the waterfall suddenly shook. The waterfall that was pouring down began to slowly split apart, splitting into two sides. A pitch-black cave appeared behind the waterfall. There was actually another world within this valley. Many people were shocked by the scene that suddenly appeared. In the next moment, everyone burst into an uproar. They came back to their senses and were extremely excited. This is a powerhouse's relic. There are great opportunities and great opportunities inside. Someone exclaimed loudly. There was a mysterious energy fluctuation coming out from the dark hole. The experts around the waterfall went crazy. They glanced at each other and shot out their true chi, rushing towards the entrance of the waterfall. They didn't care about the dragonification tree, and they could ignore the true dragon fruit, but when the ruins of a powerhouse appeared, no one could remain calm. No one knew what was in the ruins of a powerhouse, but it was definitely something good. That was an opportunity that belonged to everyone. Bufang seemed to be shocked by this sudden scene as well. He turned his head to look at the source of the commotion and saw a group of crazed experts rushing into the waterfall. He did not expect that there would be a relic hidden in this place. The black flood dragon and the dragonification tree were the key to opening the ruins. Now that the black flood dragon was killed by Bufang, the ruins automatically surfaced. Young man, don't you want to go and take a look at the ruins? What if there is something good inside? Hades looked at Bufang and encouraged him. However, this time, he was going to be disappointed. That was because Bufang was really not interested in the so-called ruins of a powerhouse. Previously, he appeared in the ruins of the Supreme Blade Tyrant because he was forcefully taken in by the ruins. This was not his original intention. Compared to the ruins, Bufang felt that it was more important to return to the restaurant and cook the heavenly grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Not interested, Bufang said indifferently and kept the true dragon fruit in his hand. He patted Xiao Bai's belly and started to size up the valley. This valley was rich in spiritual energy, and there were many precious spiritual ingredients growing here. Some of these spiritual ingredients could not be wasted. After Bufang chose some useful and precious spiritual ingredients, he clapped his hands and let out a long breath. Let's go back. Bufang turned around and said to Yu. Yu was taken aback. Did Bufang really not want to enter the ruins? That was the ruins of a powerhouse. Okay. However, Yu did not choose to ask. After nodding her head, she was about to activate the Netherworld ship. Yu was the Netherworld woman of the secret realm. As long as she had the Netherworld ship, she could leave the secret realm at will. She did not need to use the teleportation array. Go back? Go back to where? Lass, you can't leave the ruins as you please. Those old fellows in the Netherworld are already criticizing you for leaving the ruins. Hades listened to the conversation between Bufang and Yu and furrowed his brows. Yu was the Netherworld woman who was exiled. She had to endure enough curses. Only when the effects of the curses disappeared would she be able to return to the Netherworld. Before that, the Netherworld woman had to stay in the secret realm and ride the Netherworld ship endlessly. Although he was Hades, he was unable to remove the Netherworld woman's curse. Moreover, those old fellows were not easy to deal with. Yu expressionlessly turned around and looked at Hades. We want to return to Bufang's restaurant. There are a lot of chili strips there, Yu said seriously. Let's go back. This miasma in the secret realm is really boring. We need the warmth of a home. Let's go together. It's on the way. Hades flicked his black hair and said to Yu with a face full of melancholy. The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched. Was this really Hades? The legendary lord of the Netherworld? Why didn't he have the temperament of an awesome person? He was even more amusing than Nangong Wuk. He really did not know what kind of sparks would fly when these two amusing people met. Lord, are you leaving just like that? Jiang Ling was a little confused. Why did they leave just like that? The relic was right in front of them, and they did not even bother to explore it. How could they be worthy of the relic that was meticulously laid out? That was a fortuitous encounter. She, Jiang Ling, was a little reluctant to let go of this opportunity. Lord, I have already missed a fortuitous encounter. This time I cannot miss it. Jiang Ling's face became serious as she looked at Hades seriously. Previously, in order to summon Hades, she had missed the inheritance of the Supreme Blade Tyrant. Now that the relic was right in front of her, she could not miss it. Hades, who had jumped onto the Netherworld ship, seemed to feel the seriousness on Jiang Ling's face. He looked at her seriously. I understand. Don't worry and go boldly. Go and chase after the fortuitous encounter that belongs to you. Your 20,000 crystals. When we meet again, I will return it to you. If Hades did not add the last sentence, Jiang Ling would really be a little touched. However, Jiang Ling's real goal was not this, Lord. You promised to give me the fortuitous encounter. When I return from the relic, I will go and find you. Jiang Ling's body jumped up high, and the 4 true energy chains behind her swayed. Her head full of white hair covered her face. As she spoke, she flew towards the relic. Hades looked at Jiang Ling's disappearing figure. He stood on the Netherworld ship and sighed. Youngsters these days. So mischievous. Rumble. In the sky, a terrifying energy wave surged over. The true energy that filled the sky seemed to have turned into clouds. A figure walked through the air. Every step he took caused torrential ripples to spread across the sky. It was an old man, a white-haired old man wearing an alchemist robe. He crossed the void and directly entered the relic. It seemed like the relic this time was not ordinary. Even such an existence was alarmed. It was not just one such expert. There was a red sword light that tore through the sky. The true energy that filled the sky seemed to want to tear apart everything. On top of the red long sword, a person stepped on it. Riding on the sword, he rapidly flew into the relic. Some people rode on eagles and some came on foot. However, without a doubt, the aura of these people was terrifyingly strong. Bufang was quite surprised. I told you, if you don't go to the relic, you will suffer a great loss. Look, so many powerful people have entered the relic. Do you regret it? Hades said to Bufang. However, Bufang still shook his head. The aura of these experts far surpassed any of Bufang's previous opponents. It was very likely that they were a group of divine soul realm experts. Facing these experts, the chances of Bufang snatching the fortuitous encounter were very small. Since the chances were small, Bufang would not choose to go. He might as well return to the restaurant and cook the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. A creaking sound rang out. The netherworld ship slowly rose into the sky. You stood in front of the deck. Her waist-length black hair fluttered in the wind. She raised her palm, and an invisible force fluctuated. With a ripping sound, the space was directly torn apart. The speed of the netherworld ship suddenly increased. In the next instant, it once again tore apart the space, slowly emerging from the vault of heaven. 2 crescent moons quietly hung in the sky. That calm space trembled, and a black wooden ship emerged from the torn space. The torn space quickly returned to normal. Buzz, a majestic wave of air surged, and the netherworld ship floated not far from the ground. Wow! It's really a nostalgic feeling. Although the spiritual energy here is much thinner than in the netherworld, the air here is very fresh. It makes people feel refreshed. On the netherworld ship, Hades' Era stepped on the void, spinning around. He squinted his eyes and spread his arms, his face full of satisfaction. Yu Bufang and the huge Xiao Bai jumped off the netherworld ship. With a boom, it caused a huge tremor. In the distance, the Cloud Mist restaurant stood quietly. Under the illumination of the moonlight, it seemed to be covered with a layer of cool silk. Bufang also squinted his eyes, looking at the Cloud Mist restaurant. His heart felt at ease. He really enjoyed this feeling. Compared to the secret realm with thick spiritual energy and many treasures, Bufang still liked his small kitchen. Opening the bronze door of the restaurant, Bufang clasped his hands as he walked into the restaurant. You waved her hand, and the netherworld ship instantly dashed into the restaurant, quietly landing under the Path Understanding tree. With a loud thud, the Path Understanding tree trembled. Leaves fell from the tree and landed on Lord Dog's nose, who was snoring loudly. It made Lord Go feel a little itchy, and he sneezed. Lord Go opened his drowsy dog eyes, looking at Bufang, who had stepped into the restaurant under the moonlight. With a magnetic voice, he said, "Bufang, kiddo, you're back." Outside the restaurant, Hades, who was floating in the void, suddenly moved his ears. His eyes opened and his handsome face trembled. He took a deep breath, looking at the Cloud Mist restaurant. His eyes seemed to emit light, as if he could see the entire Cloud Mist restaurant clearly. Under the Path Understanding tree, Lord Go felt something. He lazily raised his head, looking at Hades, who was floating in the void outside the restaurant. A man and a dog looked at each other through the ceiling. Eh? It's that damn old man? Lord Go was stunned. Hades, on the other hand, heaved a sigh of relief. This black dog is as fat as a ball. It's definitely not that shameless mangy dog. Chapter 592. With regards to Hades's appearance, the Lord Go didn't seem to be too surprised. He was just a little bewildered. After yawning, the Lord Go continued to lie down and began to snore. After comforting himself, Hades's face regained its melancholy. He landed and followed you into the restaurant. As soon as he entered the restaurant, the Nether King looked around curiously. The interior of the restaurant was extremely clean, without a speck of dust. The air was filled with the fragrance of the dishes, and the Nether King couldn't help but sniff. Pulling a chair and sitting down, Hades grinned and continued to look around the restaurant. All of a sudden, his eyes fell on the Lord Go, who was sleeping under the path understanding tree in the distance. Tisk, tsk, tsk. This black dog is really fat. Its whole body is full of meat. It's really an eyesore. In comparison, that mangy dog is more handsome. Hades rubbed his chin, commenting on the black dog. He stood up, strolling in front of the Lord Go. With his hands clasped behind his back, he looked up and down. After a while, he nodded as if nothing had happened. But I have to say, although your dog is a little fat, it's still a little similar to that mangy dog. Their auras are almost the same. It's amazing. Hades turned his head and said to Bufang, who had just walked out of the kitchen. Bufang glanced at him and didn't bother to pay attention to him. If this clown wanted to provoke the Lord Go, then let him be. Anyway, he was Hades with thick skin and thick flesh. He wouldn't be smashed to death by the Lord Go's paw. Bufang walked to the door and closed it. After that, he turned around and returned to the kitchen. Hades was already used to Bufang's coldness. That young man was definitely jealous of his handsomeness. Hades squatted down and reached out to touch Lord Go's head. Although it's chubby, it feels really good, Hades praised as he touched it. Lord Go's soft and clean dog fur was very special to the touch. You sat on the Netherworld ship, swinging her long, white legs. The corner of her mouth twitched as she looked at Hades, as though she was looking at an idiot. Was this old fellow a clown, as expected? The Lord Go slowly opened his eyes and sighed. He glanced at Hades and finally spoke. Old man, if you don't move your hand away, I, the Lord Go, will not be polite anymore. A gentle and magnetic voice resounded. Hades was stunned, and his eyes widened in the next moment. Holy sh*t. This fat dog is really that mangy dog? How did this guy become so fat? You was speechless. It turned out that this old fellow really didn't recognize him. The Lord Go's head was full of black lines. He raised his exquisite dog paw and slapped Hades's face. Hades instantly let out a miserable howl. You mangy dog! If you hit someone's face, you will give birth to a child without an asshole. You're just jealous of this Hades's handsomeness. Hades's body seemed to teleport as he dodged the Lord Go's paw. Rumble! The illusionary void trembled. Under the Lord Go's paw, the illusionary void was distorted. It was enough to show the power of that paw. The Nether King still had a lingering fear in his heart. If this black dog had really slapped his face with its paw, his handsome face would have been disfigured. This mangy dog was still as shameless as ever. Old fellow, did you come with your real body, not a clone? Lord Dog looked in surprise at the Nether King who had dodged his paw. Then, he licked his paw and said calmly, You mangy dog, don't call me old fellow. I am still young. Hades tidied up his clothes and muttered to the Lord Go with a stern face. The Lord Go rolled his eyes. Shameless old fellow. You're already tens of thousands of years old, yet you're still pretending to be young. Why haven't you died because of your own thick skin? You fat mangy dog. You're as fat as a ball. Why don't you die because of your own fat? Hades retorted, unwilling to be outdone. What? Lord Go, is this what you call plump? You're not satisfied? Let's go out and have a fight. The Lord Go stood up. The fat on his body shook as he looked at Hades with his doggy eyes. Fight? Why would I be afraid of you? Today, if I don't beat off 1/2 kilogram of fat on your body, I will change my surname. Hades flipped his thick black hair and said gloomily. This old fellow. Savage. The Lord Go's nostrils slightly flared as he coldly stared at Hades. The man and the dog stared at each other in silence. It was as if there were lightning bursting in each other's eyes. You swung her white and tender legs, looking at them with an expressionless face. Hades swayed its chicken but as it walked. It also raised its head and widened its round eyes, looking at the funny man and the dog. However, Just as the two of them were confronting each other, a fragrant aroma suddenly wafted out of the kitchen. The Lord Go's eyes instantly lit up. He snorted and turned his head away, ignoring Hades. Then, he strode elegantly like a cat, swaying past Hades. Finding a spot, he slapped his doggy paw on the table. Hades sneered, flipping his thick black hair. This mangy dog was scared. However, the Nether King's nose twitched as he smelled a rich fragrance. This fragrance caused him to be stunned. He turned his head, looking at the direction where the aroma was coming from. He saw a thin figure slowly walking out of the kitchen. Bufang was holding 2 dishes in his hands. Hot steam accompanied by the aroma diffused from the porcelain plates. "Blackie, it's time to eat," Bufang said calmly. He walked in front of a table, putting down the dishes in his hands. A plate of sweet and sour ribs and a plate of dragon blood rice. "The sweet and sour ribs is Blackie's, and the dragon blood rice is you's," Bufang said. Yu and Blackie were already sitting in their seats, looking at Bufang with anticipation. The thick aroma of the sweet and sour ribs wafted on the table. The sparkling sweet and sour ribs stimulated one's appetite. The Lord Go stuck out his tongue, snorting. He was so excited. The sweet and sour ribs were the best. Although the spicy strips weren't bad, eating too much would cause internal heat. "You didn't say anything." She reached out her hand, grabbing the dragon blood rice and stuffing it into her mouth. She ate with a fierce manner. Hades looked at the scene with a dumbfounded face. He was a little dazed. What happened? What happened? What were they eating? Why did they look so delicious? Munch munch. The fat on Lord Go's body jiggled. He nibbled on the sweet and sour ribs on the porcelain plate, squinting his dog eyes. He was so happy that he could fly away. While chewing, Lord Dog glanced sideways at the Nether King, who was in a daze. The corners of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. Gulp. Hades swallowed his saliva. Looking at the sweet and sour ribs, his heart was full of desire. Looking at Lord Go and Yu's table manners, he couldn't stay calm anymore. "Young man, what about me? Is there anything for this king to eat? They all have some. I's so handsome, I'm sure I have some too, right?" Hades smiled kindly at Bufang. Bufang was bewildered. He looked at Hades as if he was looking at an idiot. "Order whatever you want to eat. Tell you that the menu is on the wall. Our restaurant will set the price, and we will not cheat anyone," Bufang said. After saying that, he turned around and went into the kitchen. He had cooked sweet and sour ribs and dragon blood rice for Lord Go and Yu. Now, he was going to prepare the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. That was an important matter that would determine whether he could advance or not. Hades looked at Bufang's back, which was gradually disappearing into the shadows of the kitchen, and he pursed his lips. He turned his head to look at the menu that Bufang had mentioned. When he saw it, his eyes instantly widened. "Naughty! You're such a naughty young man. Isn't this chili strip only 1,500 crystals? Why are you selling it to I for 20,000 crystals each? Are you trying to kill a pig?" Hades looked as if he had experienced inhumane torture. His eyes were bloodshot. He stared intently at the menu. That's right. On the menu, it was clearly marked. Spicy strips, 1,500 crystals. 1,500 crystals. Puff, Hades was so upset that he wanted to vomit blood. Was he too naive? He actually foolishly spent 20,000 crystals to buy a chili strip. The main point was that he had borrowed those 20,000 crystals using his handsome face. What a huge loss. He had even lost his underwear. Youngsters nowadays are simply too mischievous. Hades' heart ached so much that he found it hard to breathe. Munch, munch. You didn't seem to be surprised at all. She looked at Hades' sorrowful and indignant appearance with an expressionless face. She chewed unhurriedly and said, "Old man, what do you want?" Hades felt as if he was crying. He wanted to order something, but where would he get the crystals? "Can I buy it on credit? I guarantee with my handsome face that I will definitely return the crystals. Hades looked at Yu's greasy mouth and looked at the fragrant dragon blood rice. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said, "Can your face be eaten?" Yu rolled her eyes and said. Hades felt as if his little heart was pierced by an invisible arrow. At this time, Bufang walked out of the kitchen, leisurely. In his hand was a small blue and white porcelain bowl. "Adi, come. It's time to eat." "I almost forgot about you," Bufang said calmly. Adi, who was sitting on the floor to watch the show, heard that he had food to eat. He instantly clucked excitedly, stood up, shook his butt, and ran to Bufang's feet. His small eyes were shining as he stared at Bufang. The Nether King looked at this scene with a face full of despair. Looking at the little chick that was pecking at the dragon blood rice, there were 10,000 fat black dogs galloping in his heart. He couldn't even be compared to a chicken. Have you decided what dish to order? Our restaurant's dishes are discounted, and we do not cheat anyone. Please feel at ease and order, Bufang said seriously. Snort. Looking at Bufang's serious eyes, Hades felt as if he was about to spit out a mouthful of blood. Never would he have thought that Hades would finally be able to eat the delicious spicy strip. Although Hades didn't have any crystals, he suddenly remembered that he had some heaven and earth treasures. When he took out a bottle of spirit liquid that was filled with a black crystal and asked Bufang if he could buy the spicy strip, Bufang was slightly stunned. He really hadn't met anyone who used spirit liquid to exchange for dishes. Bufang took the spirit liquid from Hades's hand, and the majestic spirit energy and the unique sour taste of the spirit liquid blew over him. This is a heaven and earth treasure from the netherworld, black spirit plum juice. Although it isn't the most precious kind, after drinking it, it can still cleanse a person's body and strengthen their physical strength, Hades introduced. Although this bottle of black spirit plum juice didn't seem like a big deal, it should be known that even experts at the peak of the divine physique echelon realm would have a hard time plucking the black spirit plum juice. This was because the black spirit plum juice was guarded by a kind of netherworld spirit beast, the dark viper, which was extremely difficult to deal with. Only he, Hades, who had nothing better to do, would pluck so many of them, make them into juice, and drink it for fun. In the netherworld, this black spirit plum juice was already extremely precious. When Hades took out the black spirit plum juice, his heart ached. Bufang tasted a small mouthful of the black spirit plum juice, and his eyes slightly lit up. The sour taste with a hint of bitterness drilled into his stomach, and it made Bufang's entire body energetic. This kind of taste reminded Bufang of an extremely delicious fruit juice from his previous life. "Isn't this just a high-concentration sour plum juice?" Bufang muttered. In the end, he allowed Hades to exchange for a dish. When Hades pinched a spicy strip and sniffed it, he almost burst into tears. It really wasn't easy. Lord Go and Yu looked at the spicy strip in Hades's hand and rolled their eyes. Both of them burped and returned to the path understanding tree to rest. As for Hades, who had an intoxicated expression on his face, he didn't pay any attention. Bufang, on the other hand, carried the black spirit plum juice back to the kitchen. He planned to first mix the black spirit plum juice into a delicious sour plum juice. He also started to prepare the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Chapter 593. Bufang took the black spirit plum juice he got from Hades and returned to the kitchen. He poured the black spirit plum juice out of the black crystal jar and poured it into a porcelain bowl, filling it to the brim. The black spirit plum juice was incomparably black. Upon smelling it, there was a sourness that made one salivate. It also had a special fragrance, similar to the sour plum soup in his previous life. However, the smell was even stronger. This was also why after tasting the black spirit plum juice, the sour plum soup appeared in Bufang's mind. This black spirit plum juice could also be made into a sour plum soup. Bufang was quite interested in it. If it could be made into a sour plum soup, it would be a special drink. In Bufang's restaurant there were very few drinks. Other than wine, there was only wine. It was not bad to add a fruit juice drink. Green smoke curled around his hand and the black turtle constellation wok appeared. Bufang placed the wok on the stove and opened his mouth to spit out a golden flame. The flame entered the bottom of the wok and instantly emitted a high temperature, heating up the black turtle constellation wok. After pouring the black spirit plum juice into the wok, Bufang lowered the temperature of the 10,000 bestial flames and began to simmer it. On the other side, he began to take out spirit herbs from the system's dimensional storage. These spirit herbs were all found in the Heaven's Secret territory. Although their medicinal effects were not very strong, they were not weak either. They were perfect for making sour plum soup. The selection of spirit herbs was actually a matter of consideration. Bufang searched for a while before choosing a flower-type spirit herb. He used the dragon bone kitchen knife to grind the spirit herb and poured it into the black turtle constellation wok. Of course, it wasn't just a single spirit herb. There were also spirit herbs that looked like tree roots and a red spirit fruit. After pouring all these spirit herbs into the black turtle constellation wok, the spirit herbs began to boil. Gurgle. The black spirit plum juice in the wok quickly boiled, releasing some sweet and sour bubbles. Bufang took out a huge spirit fruit. The spirit fruit was very big, about the size of a human head. Bufang cracked a hole on the spirit fruit, allowing the sweet, transparent juice to flow out into the black turtle constellation wok, diluting the black spirit plum juice. The originally pitch-black black spirit plum juice gradually became a little thinner. After adding the spirit juice, Bufang increased the intensity of the 10,000 bestial flames. In an instant, the sour plum juice in the wok began to boil. Steaming hot air surged, and the sweet and sour white gas kept surging up. Bufang took a deep breath, and a sweet and sour taste immediately drilled into his mouth, causing him to salivate. Not bad, this sweet and sour taste is just right. It won't make you burp like vinegar, but it won't be too light either. Bufang praised. He had to admit that this black spirit plum juice was really good stuff. If Hades had such a good item, he should have taken it out earlier. If he had taken it out earlier, Bufang would have given him a spicy strip. Exchanging a spicy strip for this sour plum juice wasn't a loss at all. When the sour plum juice in the wok completely turned red, Bufang knew that it was about time to take it out of the wok. The sour plum juice that was taken out of the wok was actually not finished yet. It was still lacking a little sweetness, which was the key to making the sour plum juice so delicious. In fact, this step was the best way to add honey, but Bufang didn't have anything like honey on hand. Thus, he could only add the rock candy provided by the system. Swish! Hot steam rose up from the ground. Bufang poured the sour plum juice into a porcelain bowl. Looking at the ruby-like sparkling and translucent sour plum juice, Bufang was quite satisfied. However, Bufang didn't plan to drink it so quickly. If the sour plum juice was too hot, it wouldn't taste good. If it was chilled, then the sour and refreshing taste would make one's pores shrink. He placed the sour plum juice aside to cool. Bufang turned around and prepared to cook the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. The heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup is much more difficult to cook than the ordinary Buddha jumps over the wall soup. This is because the quality and grade of the ingredients used are much higher, and the spiritual energy is very dense. It is extremely difficult to control it well. Bufang rubbed his chin and pondered. After pondering for a long time, he took out the ingredients from the system's dimensional storage. A pitch-black true dragon fruit emitted a faint spiritual energy fluctuation, and it seemed as though there was a small dragon drilling around the surface of the fruit. He also took out some precious spirit herbs, as well as some high-grade spirit beast meat. Bufang also took out a piece of the black flood dragon meat that guarded the true dragon fruit. The grade of this black flood dragon was very high, and its meat was naturally the best choice for cooking the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Bufang also took out the precious phoenix egg. However, after carefully examining the phoenix egg, Bufang put it away in the end. He felt that if he used the phoenix egg to cook the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup, it would really be a waste. Ingredient after ingredient was taken out by Bufang. The grade of these ingredients was extremely high, and if others saw them, they would feel extremely frightened. I still lack a chicken claw. Should I borrow it from 80? Bufang looked at all the ingredients that he had prepared and pondered for a moment. Thus Bufang turned around and walked out of the kitchen. Outside the kitchen, 80 was focused on pecking at the dragon blood rice grain by grain. In the distance, Hades's face was filled with enjoyment as he sucked on a chili strip in his mouth. His actions were somewhat wretched. After Blackie ate and drank its fill, it laid down under the path understanding tree and slept. You also went into the netherworld ship to rest. 80 was happily eating the dragon blood rice. Previously, it thought that coming to this restaurant would be its disaster. However, it did not expect that this restaurant would be so wonderful. It accidentally ate until it became fat. However, it was good to be fat. As a chicken with ideals, how could it not become fat? As a chicken, it was proud to be fat. 80 wiggled its chicken butt and clucked a few times before continuing to work on the dragon blood rice. All of a sudden, 80's body stiffened, and it slowly raised its head. When it turned around, it saw Bufang, whose eyes were shining, staring at it expressionlessly. That gaze. 80 was too familiar with it. As an 8 treasures chicken that had lived for so long, 80 was very familiar with gazes. In the past, Nangong Wuk looked at it with the same gaze. In the end, one of its chicken wings was snatched away. From then on, it deeply remembered that gaze that harbored evil intentions. Why did Bufang have that gaze? What did he want to do to the chicken? Cluck, cluck, cluck. 80's eyes widened, and after swallowing the dragon blood rice in its mouth, it looked at Bufang with vigilance as its little chicken claw retreated. Don't be afraid. Is the dragon blood rice delicious? If it's delicious, I will give it to you tomorrow. The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched, revealing a smile that he thought was friendly. Something wasn't right. 80's chicken comb shook slightly, and it slowly raised its chicken wing. That. 80 be good. Lend me a chicken drumstick, Bufang said seriously, and the twisted expression on his face caused 80's feathers to stand on end. Lend me a chicken drumstick? As expected. You're a human with bad intentions. How could he lend a chicken drumstick? That was the reason why it was running. If it lost its chicken drumstick, wouldn't it be at the mercy of a human? At that time, it would have to borrow a chicken wing and a chicken butt. Cluck, cluck, cluck. He definitely wouldn't allow it. 80's eyes widened, and it spread its chicken claws and started to run. With a shake of its wings, feathers fluttered. Run, 80. Under Bufang's dumbfounded gaze, 80 twisted its chicken butt and sprinted forward. It leaped high into the air, and took large strides towards the Nether King's head, who was still sucking on the chili strip with his eyes closed. Wasn't it just borrowing a chicken drumstick? Was there a need to do this? The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched. He shook his head, and he gave up on borrowing a chicken drumstick from 80. He turned around and returned to the kitchen. A chicken feather fluttered down, and it landed on Hades's nose. Hades couldn't help but open his eyes. Where did this chicken feather come from? Hades was stunned for a moment, but he was too lazy to care about it. He continued sucking on the chili strip. Bufang returned to the kitchen, and after thinking for a moment, he found a chicken foot that wasn't of a high grade. Although it couldn't be compared to the 8 treasures chicken's chicken foot, it was at least worthy of the heavenly grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand spun, and after twirling it, Bufang took the true dragon fruit, and with a slash of the knife, he cut open the skin of the true dragon fruit. In the next instant, the knife moved, and it was so fast that it almost made people dizzy. The skin of the true dragon fruit was cut off by Bufang. With a horizontal cut, the true dragon fruit was cut into 2 halves, and a golden juice flowed out from the center of the true dragon fruit. Bufang used a blue and white porcelain bowl that he had prepared to scoop up the juice. The black turtle constellation wok was already filled with the spirit beast meat. The black flood dragon meat was spread on the bottom of the wok by Bufang. The black flood dragon's skin was peeled off by him, and he used the kitchen knife to cut it open, so that the flavor of the flood dragon meat could be fully absorbed. After that, he poured the juice of the true dragon fruit into the wok, and he spread the true dragon fruit's flesh on top of it. He also placed the chicken feet inside. In addition, he prepared a type of deep-sea spirit abalone in the middle of the wok, and he spread all kinds of ingredients on top of it. After everything was prepared, he took out a golden Buddha jar lid. The face of the Buddha on the jar was full of smiles, and it had a round belly. It looked incomparably amiable. After pouring spirit spring water into the jar, Bufang covered the jar with the lid. After pouring water into the wok, a golden heaven and earth obsidian flame spouted out, and he started to cook the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. After finishing everything, Bufang didn't immediately use his mental energy to guide the spirit energy in the wok. Instead, he placed the sour plum soup, which had already cooled down, into a cabinet that had a freezing effect. He let the fridge cool the sour plum soup. After he finished cooking the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup, he would be able to enjoy a bowl of sour plum soup. After finishing everything, he returned to the stove and took a deep breath. The Shura tower in front of his chest seemed to have sensed Bufang's powerful mental energy, and it floated up slightly. Bufang's waterfall-like mental energy immediately poured out. Bufang's gaze became solemn, and his face became incomparably solemn. The process of cooking the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup was the most difficult. The difference in the grade of the ingredients would result in the difference in the usage of mental energy. Within the store, Hades finally stuffed the last chili strip into his mouth. He stuck out his tongue and licked his lip. Hades's eyes were filled with reluctance. He finished it just like that? He still hadn't sucked enough. After sucking on his finger, which was stained with the sweet and spicy taste of the chili strip, Hades helplessly sighed. Although that youngster is a little stingy, the taste of the chili strip is really good. Hades sighed. At this moment, he felt a headache. How should he exchange the chili strip with that stingy youngster tomorrow? Should he continue using the black spirit plum juice? He didn't know if that stingy youngster would accept it. All of a sudden, Hades's nose twitched, and his eyes lit up. He turned his head to look in the direction of the kitchen and strode towards it. It smells so good. What is this smell? Why is it so fragrant? It's as if a small hand is caressing my heart. Hades exclaimed in admiration. It was the first time he smelled such a fragrance. However, just as he was about to step into the kitchen, a voice suddenly rang out. However, a huge figure blocked his way. Xiao Bai's purple eyes twinkled. He raised his fan-like hand and said, "The kitchen is an important place. Unauthorized people are not allowed to enter." Hades was taken aback. He was not allowed to enter a small kitchen? Naughty. It's just a kitchen. I just want to see what you're cooking inside. Hades stretched out a finger and tapped on Xiao Bai's plump belly as he said with a smile. Xiao Bai's purple eyes twinkled, but he didn't move. Hades curled his lips and took a step back. He mumbled to himself as if he wanted to leave the kitchen. However, in the next moment, the corners of Hades's mouth curled up, revealing a trace of light. His figure suddenly flashed. It was as if the ground had shrunk to an inch as he teleported toward the kitchen. Xiao Bai was in a daze. He really couldn't stop him. Hades was very proud of himself. However, in the next moment, he felt his heart palpitate. His heart tightened and his hair stood on end. Sizzle! Sizzle! Bolts of lightning struck down. Hades, who was about to step into the kitchen, suddenly froze. Chapter 594. The appearance of this lightning bolt was extremely sudden, completely out of the Nether King's expectations. That lightning bolt, with a hint of purple radiance, smashed down, causing a thunderous roar. The entire air seemed to have been smashed down, and its might was boundless. Hades didn't expect that a small restaurant could have such a level of lightning bolt. The instant the alarm rose in his heart, his body reacted. A pitch-black energy surged out in an attempt to block the lightning bolt. Lord Go, who was sleeping soundly under the path understanding tree, suddenly opened his eyes, looking at the entrance of the kitchen. His eyes were solemn and playful. He was solemn because of that lightning bolt. That lightning bolt made his heart palpitate. As for playfulness, of course, it was because of Hades, that old man courting death. Even he was curious about that kid Bufong's kitchen. However, he didn't have the mood to explore it. That was because that kitchen always gave him a terrible feeling of danger. That kind of danger, even those old fellows in the netherworld couldn't give him that kind of feeling. Hades, that old man, dared to explore that kitchen the first time he came here. If he wasn't courting death, what was? You just need to eat. Why did you have to go to someone else's kitchen to spy? Did you have nothing better to do? Boom, boom, boom. Hades's entire body shot out lightning bolt. Even with his powerful body, he couldn't resist it. With a loud boom, he was blown away, landing on the ground. Every strand of his hair was standing on end, emitting green smoke. The whites of his eyes were rolled back, and his mouth was gaping as green smoke filled the air. He was in an extremely sorry state, like a chicken without feathers that had been roasted. Hades coughed a few times, then took in a breath of cold air. He turned around and sat up. Looking at his torn skin, he couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. That lightning bolt was so terrifying. It could be compared to the lightning bolt when he was crossing the tribulation. If it weren't Hades who had barged in, but someone else, that person would have been blasted into ashes by that lightning bolt. As Hades, his cultivation base was formidable, and his body was invincible. He could look down on the entire hidden dragon continent. But he actually suffered a setback in this tiny restaurant. It was simply awkward. The cracked skin on Hades's body was slowly mending. Soon, he was back to normal. He looked in the direction of the kitchen again with lingering fear. Was that an array? There was actually a formation set up at the entrance of the kitchen? A formation of this level. Who was that young man? Hades's heart was filled with curiosity. He originally thought that the young man was just an ordinary little chef in the hidden dragon continent. However, as soon as the array appeared, Hades knew that this little chef was not simple. No wonder this mangy dog would stay in this restaurant. There was indeed something fishy going on. When he thought of that mangy dog, Hades was instantly stunned. He turned his head to look and immediately noticed that the mangy dog's face was covered in a sneer. Hades's face instantly turned red. Damn it! I've been laughed at by this mangy dog. Feeling extremely embarrassed, he pressed his curled hair and wiped the blackness on his face. Then, Hades cracked his mouth, smiling at Blackie, revealing his white teeth. His white teeth were set off by Hades's swarthy face, which looked so white that they shone. Retard. Lord Go looked at Hades's funny appearance. He rolled his eyes, yawned, and mumbled something. Then, he continued to lie down and sleep. Lord Go didn't know what kind of existence was behind Bufong, but he knew that existence was definitely not simple. Moreover, whether that existence was awesome or not, what did it have to do with him? He was only responsible for eating the sweet and sour ribs. The aroma wafting out of the kitchen became thicker and thicker, bringing with it a special rhythm. It was as if there was a Zen chant drifting in the air. Buzz, on the second floor, 80 swayed its chicken butt, quietly running down. Lord Go opened his eyes, which shone brightly. This brat, Bufang, did he come up with a new dish again? This aroma seems pretty good, Lord Go muttered in his heart. The netherworld ship swayed, and a pair of fair and slender legs stepped out of the ship. You opened her eyes wide, sitting on the netherworld ship and swinging her legs. She looked in the direction of the kitchen. Without a doubt, this aroma that suddenly pervaded the air caused them to be unable to sleep. In the kitchen, beads of sweat covered Bufang's forehead. This was the first time he had such a difficult time cooking. The Shura tower floated up, emitting a brilliant light. It was obvious that Bufang had pushed it to the limit. His mental energy caused the surroundings to become sticky, and even the air flow became slower. Beads of sweat rolled down from Bufang's forehead, slowly falling to the ground. Within the Black Turtle constellation walk, the heaven and earth obsidian flame burned fiercely. The flames soared into the sky, and hot steam filled the air. The Heaven Alps spirit spring water within the walk was boiling, causing steam to surge up. It was as if a mushroom cloud had erupted, rushing up to the ceiling. Amidst the hazy steam, a smiling Buddha sat cross-legged. His face seemed to be emitting a golden light, and his face was filled with kindness. Bufang took a deep breath, and his gaze became sluggish once again. He continued to use his mental energy to control the flow of spiritual energy within the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. His cultivation was still weak, and it was extremely difficult for him to cook this heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. His mental energy was almost completely sucked dry. Bufang's complexion was a little pale. Suddenly, he freed one of his hands, and with a flick of his wrist, a scarlet chili strip appeared in his hand. He stuffed the chili strip into his mouth, and began to chew it in big bites. Beads of sweat dripped down from the tip of his nose, but his complexion gradually became better. Just like that, Bufang immersed himself in the arduous process of cooking the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Outside the kitchen, the sound of Buddha's voice permeated the air, and Hades's expression became more and more solemn. What kind of dish was that youngster cooking? Why was there such a huge commotion? Yu was also slightly stunned, and she looked toward the kitchen. Lord Go didn't seem to care. He yawned and laid on the ground. However, he didn't sleep, and it was obvious that he was waiting for Bufang to cook. It seemed like he didn't sleep that night. In the pitch-black night sky, a ray of white light slowly appeared. The radiance of the stars gradually dimmed. A resplendent radiance shot out from the end of the sky, and it was like a ray of sword light. It cut the pitch-black night into pieces, tearing apart the heavy curtain of night. Inside the cloud mist restaurant, the surging energy finally calmed down. Hades, who had been staring for the whole night, finally rolled his eyes. He was a little tired. It's finally over. What kind of dish is it? I'm really looking forward to it. Youngsters these days, even when cooking, they are so naughty. In the kitchen, Bufang's hands drooped down, and he took 2 steps back. He leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. Looking at the ordinary Buddha jumps over the wall soup in the Black Turtle constellation walk, the corners of his mouth finally rose. The face of the Buddha on the lid was glowing red, and it was vivid and lifelike. It seemed like it was about to come to life, and the smile on its face seemed to be trembling. From time to time, a faint radiance revolved around the Buddha, making it look even more lifelike. Bufang wiped the beads of sweat off his forehead, and he gently exhaled. He straightened his body, which was slightly swaying. The true energy in his body seemed to have been sucked dry, and he was incomparably tired. He walked toward the freezer and opened its door. Inside, there was a big blue and white porcelain bowl filled with sour plum juice. He took out a transparent crystal cup. Bufang scooped up a cup of sour plum juice. After being chilled, the sour plum juice was incomparably cold, and the crystal cup was filled with water droplets because of the coldness. Looking at the sour plum juice, Bufang's throat moved, and he felt a little thirsty. He faced the crystal cup and gulped a mouthful. Gulp. That sweet and sour plum juice, which was incomparably cold, entered his mouth, and it made all the pores on Bu Fang's body tighten. A refreshing feeling instantly exploded within Bu Fang's body. The chilled sour plum juice flowed through his mouth and into his stomach, and he couldn't help but close his eyes in enjoyment. That kind of feeling was really indescribable. His heart was chilled and his heart was soaring. Refreshing. After drinking a mouthful, Bu Fang exhaled a slightly cold breath, and the corners of his mouth slightly curled up. He felt incomparably refreshed. After letting the Buddha jumps over the wall soup simmer in the black turtle constellation walk for a while, Bu Fang carried the sour plum juice out of the kitchen. As soon as he walked out of the kitchen, the gazes of the people in the restaurant instantly landed on him. Bu Fang blinked his eyes and drank a mouthful of sour plum juice. He raised his eyebrows, and it seemed as though he didn't understand the gazes of these people. Bu Fang's gaze landed on Hades, and when he saw Hades's afro, he was instantly taken aback. When did this fellow change his hairstyle? However, Bu Fang didn't care about it. He raised the crystal cup in his hand and calmly said, "Come, have a drink made with your black spirit plum juice." A drink made with black spirit plum juice? Hades was taken aback. He saw the red-colored juice in Bu Fang's hand. This thing was made with black spirit plum juice? Bu Fang placed the black spirit plum juice on the table, scooped a cup and passed it to Hades. "What the? It's so cold." Hades held the crystal cup in his hand and he jumped in fright. In the distance you had stealthily sneaked over. Her long eyelashes trembled as she stared at the sour plum juice in the porcelain bowl. "What is this?" you asked. Bu Fang looked at this woman's expression and knew what she wanted. Thus, Bu Fang didn't reply, and he directly scooped a cup of juice and passed it to her. You took the sour plum juice, and her eyes slightly lit up. That ice-cold feeling made her feel weird. She took a small sip. Her eyes were incomparably bright, and it was as though there was a ray of light shooting out from them. "Delicious." You pouted her lips and said happily. After saying that, she took another small sip. Her eyes narrowed, and her face was filled with enjoyment. Hades glanced at the sour plum juice, and he opened his nostrils to take a sniff. In the end, he drank a mouthful. The moment the sour and sweet ice-cold feeling entered his mouth, his pores instantly shrank and his afro trembled. "This is black spirit plum juice." Hades's face was filled with astonishment. He gulped down the sour plum juice in his mouth and looked at Bu Fang with a strange expression. How could such a delicious thing be his sour and bitter black spirit plum juice? Was this youngster bluffing him? "This is the genuine sour plum juice. Oh, it's made with the black spirit plum juice that you provided. Don't you want to eat chili strips? If you provide me with black spirit plum juice every day, I will give you 3 chili strips for free." Bu Fang expressionlessly looked at Hades and said. When Hades heard that, his whole body trembled, and his heart instantly bloomed with joy. "Ha ha! Youngster, you finally stopped being naughty. Deal." Hades drank the sour plum juice in one gulp and patted his chest as he guaranteed. The corners of Bu Fang's mouth also twitched. Suddenly, his expression changed, and he turned around and walked toward the kitchen. "Wait a moment, the real good stuff is about to come out." The heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup was finally completed. Chapter 595. The fragrance wafting through the kitchen stirred up Hades and used taste buds. Even Blackie, who was lying on the floor, stood up. The fat on its body slightly trembled as it gracefully strode over to the dining table. Its doggy eyes emitted a bright light as it stared in the direction of the kitchen. This kind of imposing dish was definitely not an ordinary dish. The spirit energy contained within the fragrance and the fragrance of the ingredients were extremely wonderful. It was like a meticulously drawn painting. You found a seat and sat down. She held the ice-cold sour plum juice with both hands and squinted her eyes as she happily sipped it. She loved this sour plum juice so much that she couldn't bear to part with it. In an instant, her heart was captured. Hades, and you were different. That fellow had an afro on his head as he gulped down the sour plum juice. After drinking it, he deeply sighed. Bufang turned around and returned to the kitchen. The restaurant instantly became quiet. Everyone was looking forward to the dish that Bufang was going to take out next. Shortly after, a figure slowly walked out from the shadows of the kitchen. He held a huge jar in his hand, and on the lid of the jar, there was an amiable Buddha. That Buddha seemed to have come to life, and its body emitted a radiance. Just by looking at it, everyone felt as though there was a Buddhist hymn in their ears, causing them to be in a trance. An oppressive fragrance wafted out from the crack of the lid. It wasn't very strong, but it was extremely rich and intoxicating. A thud resounded. The Buddha jumps over the wall soup, which was still emitting steam, was placed on the table by Bufang. Hades and the others curiously looked at the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. They were slightly astonished. Could such a big jar contain such a good thing? You looked at the Buddha jumps over the wall soup, feeling somewhat puzzled. She realized that Bufang had already cooked this dish. She took a sip of the sour plum juice. Yu's eyelashes slightly trembled. She raised her head and looked at Bufang. Isn't this the Buddha jumps over the wall soup? Yes. It's Buddha jumps over the wall soup, but it's not an ordinary Buddha jumps over the wall soup, Bufang said seriously. The Buddha jumps over the wall soup is divided into 2 grades, mortal grade and heavenly grade. The previous Buddha jumps over the wall soup were all mortal grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Although the ingredients used were not bad, they weren't considered very high grade. The current heavenly grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup is the highest grade ingredient used so far, Bufang said solemnly. With so many high-grade ingredients mixed together, the spiritual energy inside was very chaotic, and the cooking process was very difficult. He spent an entire night to finish cooking the dish. True Qi cooking was one of the cooking methods that Bufang was best at. He used his mental strength and true Qi to control the flow of true Qi in the dishes, as well as the taste and aroma of the ingredients. This would consume a lot of mental power, true Qi, and physical strength of the chef. After cooking the Buddha jumps over the wall soup, Bufang's body was completely drained of true energy. If he hadn't eaten a chili strip, he wouldn't have been able to recover. Bufang might not even have the strength to stand at this moment. After cooking, he drank a cup of sour and refreshing sour plum soup to recover his energy. It was undeniable that the heavenly grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup had consumed a lot of Bufang's energy. Bufang also attached great importance to this dish. Open the lid. Let I taste it for you, Hades said as he licked his lips. Bufang glanced at him and didn't say anything. The energy whirlpool in his dantian revolved, and a wisp of true energy gushed out and covered his hand. He used his palm, which was covered with true energy, to open the lid of the jar. The amiable Buddha was vivid and lifelike, and it seemed as though it was about to come to life. The instant the lid was opened underneath the Buddha, a 7-colored mist rose up, and it seemed as though it had transformed into auspicious clouds that supported the Buddha. When the 7-colored mist dissipated, a golden beam of light shot up from the lid of the jar, dispersing the mist. It was dazzling. Buzz, an abundant wave of spirit energy spread out, causing everyone's heart to tremble. The fragrance was so dense that it seemed as though it was about to turn into an ocean. Hades, who was the closest to it, was instantly enveloped by the warm fragrance. He couldn't help but narrow his eyes as he was intoxicated by the fragrance. As the fragrance surged, you stopped sipping the sour plum soup and deeply inhaled the fragrance of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Lord Go stuck out his tongue, smelling the fragrance with satisfaction. In a corner far away, 80's chicken butt was constantly swaying, and its wings were slightly spread out. As the fragrance surged, It seemed as though it was about to ascend to the heavens. At the same time, the fragrance spread out from the store, diffusing out of the restaurant. The sky was already very bright. The owners of the elixir stores were preparing to start work, and the elixir stores around the restaurant were opening for business. However, as the fragrance spread out, those people's shouts suddenly stopped. The diners all looked in the direction of the restaurant in astonishment. This smell is so fragrant. Is Owner Boo cooking a new dish? There's a fragrance. Is Owner Boo back? That's great. I can finally taste Owner Boo's cooking again. The diners were incomparably excited, and they all moved toward the direction of the restaurant. They were truly happy from the bottom of their hearts. The restaurant had been closed for several days. Ever since the day they sold the 3 spicy strips, the store hadn't opened for business, and there hadn't been any activity. Now that there was finally some activity, the diners were naturally excited. Owner Boo was the champion of this year's Magical Hand Conference. His dishes had crushed many other alchemists, and he had long become an influential figure in Heavenly Mist City. Everyone wanted to see the elegance of Owner Boo. The light gradually dimmed. The fragrance was still spreading out. Hades opened his intoxicated eyes, and he impatiently looked at Bufang. Young man, quickly give I a bowl. Smelling the fragrance, Hades's saliva flowed out of his mouth. How could it be so fragrant? He had never smelled something so fragrant before. In the netherworld, he had never tasted such a fragrant dish. Lord Go and you also looked at Bufang with a serious expression. The corners of Bufang's mouth rose slightly. Everyone's reaction wasn't beyond his expectations. The heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup's charm was unstoppable. With so many high-grade ingredients, the effect of the dish was naturally extraordinary. Taking out a blue and white porcelain bowl, Bufang prepared to ladle out the broth. The broth of the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup was somewhat viscous, and it was brown in color. It emitted a unique fragrance. Within that fragrance there were many strange fragrances, and it was extraordinary. After hundreds and thousands of twists and turns, the fragrance rose in spirals. Swish! The restaurant was silent, and only the sound of people swallowing their saliva could be heard. Bufang picked up a piece of black flood dragon meat and placed it into the blue and white porcelain bowl. He then passed the bowl to Hades, who was the closest to him. Hades received the bowl, and his mood was extremely excited. Ignoring Hades, Bufang continued to ladle out the broth. This portion is for you. In the end, he also ladled a portion for Blackie. After everyone was done, Bufang also ladled a portion for himself. Bufang had worked so hard to cook the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup, so how could he not try it? Adi stared at Bufang from afar. Seeing that Bufang had ignored it, it immediately took small steps and ran to Bufang's side, clucking. Bufang glanced at this chicken, and his mouth twitched coldly. He was too lazy to care about this chicken. Cluck, cluck, cluck. Adi flapped its wings, and chicken feathers flew everywhere. What are you clucking about? You're a chicken, and you want to eat meat? Hades drank a mouthful of the heartwarming Buddha jumps over the wall soup. His face was flushed, and he said to Adi in a drunken manner. Adi flapped its wings, and its small eyes glared at Hades. Bufang didn't care about Adi. This stingy chicken didn't even give him a drumstick, and it still wanted to eat meat. Bufang was still considering if he should reduce the amount of dragon blood rice it ate. At this moment, Adi still didn't know that it was about to face something inhumane. It was still clucking at Bufang. Bufang used his chopsticks to pick up a piece of black flood dragon meat. The tender black flood dragon meat was full of fragrance, and it was a little like squid meat. However, it was more fragrant and more creamy than squid meat. Bufang took a bite, and the bouncy meat bloomed in his mouth. The overflowing essence energy burst forth, and dense spirit energy surged. Bufang's eyes slightly twitched. That black flood dragon meat was incomparably soft and bouncy in his mouth. It bounced against the walls of his mouth, and he couldn't help but swallow it. With a gulp, it entered his mouth. Bufang exhaled a breath of hot air, then took another bite. Drinking a mouthful of thick soup, the slightly thick soup carried the fragrance of various ingredients, spreading in his mouth. All kinds of fragrances mixed together, orderly, bringing a special taste. Together with the black flood dragon meat, it brought out the best in each other, and it was extremely enjoyable. Lord Go stuck out his tongue, licking the soup in the bowl. While licking, he squinted his eyes, looking very happy. With a roll of his tongue, a piece of white and tender black flood dragon meat was swallowed into his mouth. Munch, munch, munch. With meat to eat, Lord Go was happy. Lord Go snorted through his nose. The Nether King dripped the last drop of soup into his mouth. Smacking his lips, he savored that unforgettable fragrance, and his face became even redder. "Young man, give I another bowl." Hades looked at Bufang and said with a gentle face. 3 people and a dog, just like that, munched noisily, eating happily. Everyone was exhaling essence energy, and their faces were red. After eating a piece of meat, they exhaled hot air, which was accompanied by essence energy. Outside the restaurant, there was a long line of customers. The fragrance that was constantly wafting out from the restaurant made everyone gulp down their saliva. After Nangong Wuk got the news that Bufang had returned to Heavenly Mist City, he rushed over in a hurry. Not only him, but Sorceress and Xing and the others also couldn't wait. They had long been captivated by Bufang's delicacies. While everyone was looking forward to it, the bronze gate of the restaurant rumbled, and finally, it slowly opened. An even thicker fragrance floated out, and everyone couldn't help but take a deep breath. Outside Heavenly Mist City, under the morning sun, a figure wearing plain clothes stood, looking at the huge Heavenly Mist City. Looking at the towering buildings in the city, a smile appeared on his face. He raised his hand and instantly, a jade talisman floated in front of him. True energy surged into the jade talisman, and the jade talisman bloomed like fireworks, turning into a ferocious beast with its mouth wide open, as if it wanted to swallow the heaven and earth. The image of the ferocious beast quickly disappeared, and after a while, it turned into a blurry figure. "Senior, I am Wenrincho, a traveler of the continent. I accidentally found news about the Netherworld, and I am here to report," Wenrincho said seriously. The blurry figure was silent for a while, then said, "News about the Netherworld?" "Yes." Wenrincho was very sure. "I never thought that there would be news about the Netherworld." "Good, I will immediately send someone to confirm it. Where are you now?" the blurry figure said. Wenrincho's eyes lit up. "I am outside the Pill Palace's Heavenly Mist City. I am about to enter the city, and the clue is in the city." However, after the blurry figure knew Wenrincho's location, he replied with a strange tone, "In the Pill Palace? Shura Sovereign, that lunatic, has already returned from the hidden Dragon Royal Court. That lunatic is clamoring to flatten the Pill Palace. You have to be careful." Wenrincho was stunned, and in the next moment, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. Flatten the Pill Palace? The Shura Sovereign was really a lunatic. He actually declared that he wanted to flatten the Holy Land of Alchemists. Did the ancient Shura city want to start a war with the Pill Palace? Chapter 596. The sun was high up in the sky. Outside the Cloud Mist restaurant, there was a long line of people waiting. Everyone was filled with anticipation as they looked at the restaurant, hoping that the tightly shut bronze door would open. Many of them were already drooling, and they couldn't wait to taste Ownerbu's dishes. The fragrance that permeated the air seemed to poison them, and they couldn't resist it at all. Nangong Wuk's nostrils flared, and he leaned against the bronze door. He wanted to look through the crack of the door, but he couldn't see what was inside. Creak, a deep sound rang out. In the next instant, the bronze door slowly opened. Nangong Wuk's face, which was almost stuck to the crack of the door, trembled. He took a step back and his eyes lit up. Bufang opened the door, and he looked at Nangong Wuk, who was staring at him with a bright gaze. "Long time no see." Bufang nodded his head, and he greeted Nangong Wuk. Nangong Wuk smacked his lips, and his eyes were filled with tears as he moved to Bufang's side. "Old Bu, you're finally back. I'm dying of craving," Nangong Wuk said with an incomparable sadness. In the few days that Bufang went to the Heaven's secret territory, other than eating a chili strip, he didn't have the chance to eat anything else. In his mind, the fragrance and deliciousness of Bufang's dishes appeared, and his whole body trembled. Didn't I ask you to sell the chili strip? Didn't you manage to buy it?" Nangong Wuk seemed to be a little too excited, and Bufang instantly felt a little suspicious. "That's right. Big Sister Nethery did sell the chili strip, but cough cough cough." Just as Nangong Wuk was about to say something, his sharp eyes suddenly caught a glimpse of Nethery, who was striding forward with her long, sparkling legs. Her eyes, which were as black as ink, pierced through his heart, bringing with it an ice-cold intent. Nangong Wuk's scalp instantly went numb. "Big Sister Nethery, you're going too far." Tears streamed down Nangong Wuk's face. Under the threat of Yu's ice-cold gaze, he didn't dare to say anything. Bufang was still a little suspicious, but if Nangong Wuk didn't say anything, he wouldn't be too sure. However, he was sure that there was something fishy that he didn't know about. However, he was too lazy to find out. After asking everyone to line up and enter the restaurant, he turned around and entered the kitchen. "What dishes do you want to eat? I'll order from you." Bufang's voice drifted out from the kitchen. The customers were already clear about the process of Bufang's restaurant, so they weren't too surprised. Everyone ordered their dishes in an orderly manner. The Nether King let out a satisfied burp. His face was full of essence energy, and his burp was filled with a pleasant fragrance. He narrowed his eyes and wandered around the restaurant with his afro. After the Lord Go had eaten and drunk his fill, he lay under the path understanding tree and continued to sleep. He squinted his eyes and did not move at all. When Hades saw this scene, he finally understood how this mangy dog became so fat. After eating, he slept, and after sleeping, he ate. Did this mangy dog want to become a pig? Hades glanced at the Lord Go, straightened his back, and swung his arms in the restaurant. It seemed like he was exercising after cooking. Many people in the restaurant saw him. When they saw this clown with an afro, they were somewhat puzzled. Did owner Bu's restaurant have a newcomer? Was this afro a waiter? However, this waiter seemed a little silly. "Ha ha! Old Bu, is this the new waiter you hired? Why does he look like a broom? Every strand of his hair is standing up." Nangong Wuk found a seat and sat down. He happened to see Hades, who had eaten and drunk his fill, swinging his arms and legs. Nangong Wuk immediately laughed. That was because Hades's movements were really comical. The surrounding people couldn't help but laugh. Hades was dumbfounded. What the hell? Why were these people laughing? Especially that red-haired fellow. Who was the one who looked like a broom? Your whole family looked like a broom. He was Hades. The Lord of the Netherworld, Hades. He was an extremely awesome existence. The Nether King's face darkened. He squinted his eyes and sat beside Nangong Wuk. He looked at Nangong Wuk from the corner of his eyes, as though he wanted to use his gaze to let Nangong Wuk know his might as the Nether King. "Brother, your hairstyle is really stylish. Keep it up." Nangong Wuk swung his fiery red hair, hooking his arm around Hades's shoulder as he spoke, as if he was close with him. Hades was bewildered. Nangong Wuk continued, "Brother, you are new here, so you don't know the rules of owner Bu's restaurant. What dishes are delicious and affordable? What dishes have the strongest fragrance? What dishes have the best texture? What dishes can be combined to make you soar to the heavens?" Nangong Wuk's words were filled with confidence and experience. Hades didn't understand, but he still felt that it was awesome. Bufang's dishes were delicious, and Hades had already experienced it. That chili strip was something he couldn't stop eating. Yu's face was ice cold as she looked at the two of them, who had evil smiles on their faces. The corners of her mouth curled upwards. As though he felt Yu's gaze, Nangong Wuk quietly raised his head and glanced at her. He softly said, "Brother, do you see that big sister? You have to be careful. She is a ruthless character. In the past, this young master fought with her on the Netherworld ship for 300 rounds. Even with my peerless heroic appearance, I was almost suppressed. She is really terrifying. Brother, you have just arrived here, so you have to be careful." This kind of trash could fight with the Netherworld woman on the Netherworld ship for 300 rounds? Hades was extremely shocked. He widened his eyes and looked at Nangong Wuk as though he had discovered a new continent. Nangong Wuk's nostrils flared. He snorted and flung his fiery red hair. "I didn't study much. Don't try to deceive I. With your trashy cultivation, the Netherworld woman can crush you with a single finger," Hades said in disbelief. Nangong Wuk's pupils contracted. This brother wasn't easy to deceive. However, in the next moment, Nangong Wuk moved his head forward and started chattering. He scared Hades into a daze. Youngsters nowadays were really incredible. "By the way, brother, how should I address you? I am Nangong Wuk, the current leader of Heavenly Mist City's Nangong family," Nangong Wuk said with a smile. Did he ask for his name? Hades curled the corners of his mouth. His eyes were profound as he coldly said, "I am Hades Era, the Lord of the Netherworld." Hades Era? What a difficult name. "I will call you Little Ha from now on," Nangong Wuk said while rubbing his chin. Hades expressionlessly looked at Nangong Wuk. "Little Ha? Little Ha, your sister." He was Hades, the Hades who shook the entire Netherworld. "You are called I Little Ha? Are you sure you aren't a clown hired by that mangy dog?" A fragrant aroma wafted out of the kitchen. A skinny figure slowly walked out of the kitchen with a steaming hot dish in his hand. Bufang walked toward Nangong Wuk and placed a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall soup in front of him. Heh! Old Boo's Buddha jumps over the wall soup is really nostalgic. Nangong Wuk smacked his lips, turned his head, and said to the Nether King, "Little Ha, the most delicious dish in Old Boo's restaurant is none other than the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Although the other dishes are also delicious, the texture of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup is still better." Hades's face darkened. He was so angry that his nose almost spurted out white smoke. "I am Hades. If you call me I Little Ha again, I will kill you." Hades squinted at him. "Little Ha, don't mess around. Who are we?" Nangong Wuk smiled and opened the lid of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. A fragrant aroma wafted out. He smacked his lips and was about to eat it. However, Nangong Wuk seemed to have thought of something. He turned to Bufang and said, "Old Boo, give me another chili strip. The Buddha jumps over the wall soup with a chili strip is delicious." Bufang raised his brows. A light flashed in his hand and a chili strip with a spicy aroma appeared. Nangong Wuk received the chili strip and took a bite. Then, he gulped down a mouthful of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. He chewed for a while and exhaled a breath of hot air. When the hot air blew on Hades's face, the corners of Hades's mouth twitched. Bufang calmly looked at Hades and said, "Little Ha, if you are done eating, please leave. The restaurant is open for business, so please don't disturb us." Little Ha? Who the F***ck is Little Ha? How mischievous. Hades felt as though he was about to vomit blood. "Don't disturb us?" Youngsters nowadays, they don't recognize me at all. "Oh, Little Ha, so you aren't the waiter that Old Boo hired? I knew it. With a beauty like Nethery around, why would I need a broomhead like you? Do you not have a place to stay? Don't worry. After I finish eating, I will bring you to the Nangong mansion. There are many rooms there." Nangong Wuk took another bite of the chili strip and gulped down a mouthful of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. As he spoke, he took out a piece of chicken meat from the Buddha jumps over the wall soup and stuffed it into his mouth. Hades smacked his lips. The Buddha jumps over the wall soup paired with a chili strip could actually be eaten like this. Youngsters nowadays really knew how to play. However, young man, can you not eat while blowing air at I? I am afraid that I won't be able to control myself and will squash you to death with a finger. Bufang looked at the loving couple and curled up the corners of his mouth. He was too lazy to say anything else and returned to the kitchen to continue his business. Although he didn't rest for the whole night, Bufang was full of energy after eating the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Yu's face was rosy after eating the heaven-grade Buddha jumps over the wall soup. She was so beautiful that many people couldn't help but look at her in admiration. Little Ha, don't you have crystals to eat old Bu's dishes? Don't worry. Later on, I will bring you to get rich. As for crystals and whatnot, I will help you earn them in a matter of minutes. Nangong Wuk said as a mouthful of fragrant chili strips and Buddha jumps over the wall soup sprayed onto the Nether King's face. Hades slowly exhaled. For the sake of the chili strip, I had to endure it. In the heavenly mist city's teleportation array, a radiance flickered and in the next moment, a figure in plain clothes appeared in the teleportation array. With his hands clasped behind his back, when Rincho indifferently scanned his surroundings. He had never been to the Pill Palace's heavenly mist city before. This was his first time here. The Pill Palace was very developed. There were rows upon rows of tall buildings, which would cause people to be in a trance. Walking out of the teleportation array, when Rincho slowly strode forward. His goal in coming to the heavenly mist city was to find Bufang. However, he had heard that the Pill Palace was very popular with alchemists. Bufang, who was just a chef, shouldn't be very famous in the Pill Palace. It would be troublesome to find him. When Rincho furrowed his brows as he thought about how to find Bufang. The man who called himself Hades and the Netherworld woman were both clues related to the Netherworld. He couldn't lose any clues, so he had to find Bufang. The Shura sovereign returned from the hidden dragon royal court. That lunatic actually dared to say that he wanted to flatten the Pill Palace. Could it be that he had a breakthrough in his cultivation? Or did he find the help of the hidden dragon royal court's experts? When Rincho clasped his hands behind his back as he walked slowly. However, all of this had nothing to do with him. He just needed to find that little chef. Thinking about that little chef, when Rincho's mood turned gloomy. That little chef's culinary skills weren't any weaker than his. If he was discovered by the big shots of the Valley of Gluttony and brought to the Valley of Gluttony, he would become Rincho's competitor. Fortunately, that little chef was entangled with the people of the Netherworld. That would make things easier. When Rincho smiled, he walked slowly and pulled over a person who was walking hurriedly. He wanted to ask about that little chef. However, when the passerby heard Rincho's question, his face changed drastically. Chapter 597. The passerby's sudden change in expression gave Rincho a shock. That pair of eyes emitted a bright light, as bright as the stars in the night sky, dazzling and eye-catching. What the hell? What did this reaction mean? When Rincho raised his eyebrows and looked at the passerby. Are you here to find Owner Bu? You look like you're not from Heavenly Mist City, right? Are you from another pill city? As expected, Owner Bu is the #1 chef of the Pill Palace. Everyone wants to try his dishes. You're not the first passerby I've met. The passerby squinted his eyes and said with a smile, as if he was very proud. When Rincho was speechless. He really did not understand why this passerby was so proud. He just wanted to ask where Bufang was. He originally thought that in the Pill City, Bufang would be a nobody, but he did not expect this guy to be so famous. He randomly picked a person by the roadside, and when he talked about Bufang, His face was full of pride. The #1 chef of the Pill Palace. This title was really domineering. When Rincho squinted his eyes, and the corner of his mouth slightly curled. When he heard the passerby say that Bufang was the #1 chef of the Pill Palace, as the successor of the Valley of Gluttony, he was instantly unhappy. Although he had a cooking competition with Bufang in the inheritance ground of the Supreme Blade Tyrant, the final outcome was not decided. It was true that Bufang was very talented, but as a disciple of the Valley of Gluttony, when Rincho was confident that he could defeat Bufang. The Valley of Gluttony was a chef's paradise, and as a disciple of the Valley of Gluttony, wherever he was, no one would dare to call themselves the #1 chef. This was the pride and confidence of the disciples of the Valley of Gluttony. Hence, he felt that this trip was not only to find information about the netherworld, but also to defend the dignity of the chefs of the Valley of Gluttony. The passerby was still chattering non-stop, but when Rincho basically could not hear it anymore. Taking a deep breath, when Rincho turned his head and looked into the distance, he interrupted the passerby and said calmly, "You don't have to say too much. Tell me where Bufang is. I want to teach him how to be a chef." The words of the passers-by stopped abruptly and turned to look at Wen Rincho in disbelief. You're actually here to challenge Owner Bu?" The passerby took a deep breath and looked at Wen Rincho like he was an idiot. Owner Bu was the champion of this year's Magical Hand Conference, and he had defeated countless genius alchemists. As a chef, he stood at the peak. Where did this guy get the courage to challenge Elder Bu? When Rincho was a little unhappy with the passerby's tone. He frowned and glanced at the passerby. "I told you, I'm not here to challenge him. I'm here to teach him how to cook." The business of the restaurant continued. Some customers came in and some left. Hades left and was pulled away by the passionate Nangong Wuk. Hades said that he wanted to earn crystals to buy all kinds of chili strips, so he followed Nangong Wuk. Nangong Wuk patted his chest and assured him that he would definitely be able to earn crystals. When the last customer left the restaurant, Bufang slowly walked out of the kitchen. The remaining light of the setting sun was gradually swallowed by the ice-cold night sky. Bufang pulled a chair and sat at the entrance. He curled up on the chair and raised his head to look at the starry sky. The sky was filled with stars, and every single one of them was emitting a dazzling radiance. There were a few stars that streaked across the night sky, as if they were dragging a long tail behind them. After resting for a while, Bufang lazily stood up. He stretched his neck and yawned. After closing the bronze door, Bufang turned around and returned to the second floor, preparing to have a good rest. He first entered the bathroom to take a hot shower. The sparkling water droplets stained Bufang's white skin, and a white mist permeated the bathroom. Bufang shook his hair, and instantly, water droplets splashed everywhere. Wrapped in a bathrobe with his chest open, Bufang rubbed his wet hair and walked out of the bathroom. His body was steaming. He walked to the window and stood in front of it, feeling the cool breeze of the night blowing at him. Gently letting out a breath, Bufang felt unprecedentedly relaxed. After his hair was dried, Bufang climbed onto the bed and covered himself with a blanket. After a while, the sound of steady breathing could be heard. Heaven's secret territory. With a loud explosion, a figure flew across the sky, and blood splattered across the sky. In a large hall, many alchemists were sitting cross-legged, quietly feeling the fluctuations and inheritance in the air, comprehending the true art of alchemy. Suddenly, all of the alchemists opened their eyes and looked in one direction in astonishment. There, a ray of light crossed the void, and fiercely landed in the center of the large hall. The light was wrapped with surging energy, and the alchemists in the large hall were all extremely vigilant. When the energy that wrapped the light dissipated, everyone clearly saw the figure within, and they all sucked in a breath of cold air. "Fifth Elder?" The alchemists all cried out in shock, because they realized that the person who fell on the ground and coughed blood non-stop was not someone else. It was the Pill Palace's fifth elder, an existence in the divine soul realm. The fifth elder was seriously injured? In the heaven's secret territory, who could seriously injure the fifth elder? When everyone thought of this, they were all incomparably terrified. Didn't the fifth elder go to explore the newly appeared inheritance? How could he be seriously injured? Could it be that something happened in the inheritance? Even the fifth elder was injured to this extent. How could the others still be alive? As if someone had thought of something, they looked at each other and chattered nonstop. Everyone's faces were filled with fear. There was actually such a terrifying existence in the heaven's secret territory. The person in charge of the gathering place of alchemists hurried over, took out an intricate medicine box, opened it, and took out an elixir that was emitting a crystalline glow. On that elixir, there were densely packed lines moving, as if it was about to come to life. It was actually a 7-mark spirit elixir. After the fifth elder swallowed the spirit elixir, his complexion became much better. At the same time, the entire heaven's secret territory was in an uproar. A terrifying piece of news swept through the entire heaven's secret territory like a hurricane. In the ancient inheritance, many terrifying beasts that were emitting a thick black aura appeared. These beasts charged out from the waterfall and started a massacre. Countless experts were killed, and even the Pill Palace's fifth elder was seriously injured by the king of the beasts. The opened ruins were like a Pandora's box, from which countless devils rushed out. The various forces in the heaven's secret territory quickly sent this news back to the hidden dragon continent. Many forces received this news that there were beasts killing their way out from the secret territory. Within the heaven's secret territory, many experts had formed an alliance and headed towards the waterfall ruins together in an attempt to seal off the source of evil. The originally quiet and peaceful heaven's secret territory, in a short period of time, became a terrifying battlefield. Blood sprayed everywhere, and killing intent filled the air. Of course, all of this had nothing to do with Bufang. The first ray of sunlight shone through the window, shining on Bufang's face, making Bufang feel a little itchy. Sitting up from the bed, Bufang stretched his waist and yawned. Then, he casually folded the blanket, washed up, put on the vermilion robe, and walked down the stairs. Coming to the kitchen, Bufang familiarly began to practice his knife and carving skills. The knife flashed, and in the kitchen, all kinds of ingredients flew up, all neatly cut. Opening his mouth, he spat out a mouthful of 10,000 bestial flames, and the black turtle constellation wok instantly warmed up. Bufang began to cook the sweet and sour ribs and dragon blood rice. A thick aroma filled the restaurant, causing people to involuntarily take a deep breath. After Blackie, Yu, and 80 finished their breakfast, they all became lazy. Lord Go lay back under the path understanding tree and slept soundly. Yu, on the other hand, walked around the restaurant with her long legs. 80, this idealistic chicken, was still shaking its chicken butt, running around. Once the door of the restaurant was opened, Nangong Wuk and the Nether King were already waiting outside. Behind them, there was still a long line of people waiting. Hades walked into the restaurant with his head held high, and after exchanging the black spirit plum juice with Bufang for 3 chili strips, he raised his head at a 45-degree angle and extended his hand. There were a few crystals lying quietly in his hand. "Just order whatever you want to eat and I'll tell you." Bufang rolled his eyes at Hades's action. Why did he take out crystals to show off? What a clown. Once again, the restaurant began its daily business in an orderly manner. In the distance, a figure wearing cotton clothes slowly walked over. Looking at the long queue, he couldn't help but take in a breath of cold air. This little chef really had some skills, or else he wouldn't be able to attract so many people to line up. However, when Rincho didn't intend to line up. With his hands clasped behind his back, he walked toward the kitchen. This time, he was here to teach Bufang how to be a chef. Naturally, he wouldn't be so friendly, and he wanted to cause trouble the moment he arrived. He walked into the restaurant, and the unique atmosphere in the restaurant slightly surprised him. Wasn't this the man who called himself Hades? He was really here. When Rincho entered the restaurant, and when he turned his head, he saw Hades sitting on a chair with his mouth stuffed. With a chili strip in each hand, he sucked and chewed on it in a weird manner. When Rincho's face darkened, this clown actually called himself Hades. How shameless could he be? You carried a dish, and with her slender legs, she walked out and expressionlessly glanced at Rincho. Please line up for your meal, or else you will be treated as a troublemaker, you said coldly. The corners of Rincho's mouth curled up, and he revealed a faint smile. I'm here to cause trouble. I'm here to ask Bufang to teach me how to cook, to teach him how to be a proper person. Rincho swept his gaze across the crowd, and said in a domineering manner. At first, he thought that he could feel the crowd's excitement and enthusiasm, but Rincho was soon wrong. He realized that the crowd was looking at him as if he was an idiot. He was still carrying a porcelain plate, serving a dish to a customer. The most frightening thing was that the atmosphere suddenly became quiet, when Rincho's face alternated between green and red. As a traveler of the Valley of Gluttony in the continent, he was actually looked down upon by a group of customers in a restaurant. This was simply a humiliation. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flickered, and he walked out of the kitchen, and his gaze landed on Rincho. Troublemaker, you will be stripped as an example to others, Xiao Bai said, as if he had determined that Rincho was a troublemaker. Rincho was instantly stunned. Strip? Strip what? In the kitchen, a figure slowly walked out. Bufang wiped off the water stains on his hands, and coincidentally saw Rincho standing proudly in the restaurant, and he was slightly stunned. Why are you here? Are you ordering? Bufang asked suspiciously. When Rincho saw the person in question, he instantly squinted his eyes, and revealed a look of interest. The corners of his mouth twitched, and he said, Of course I'm not here to order. I'm here to learn from you how to cook, and to teach you how to be a proper person. Looking at the domineering Rincho, Bufang blinked his eyes. Oh, are you here to challenge me? Then line up according to the rules, Bufang said calmly. After that, Bufang went back into the kitchen and continued to cook. Rincho was instantly stunned, and his heart was roaring. He was not here to challenge. He was here to teach you how to be a proper person. Under the curious gaze of the crowd, Rincho suddenly felt a little unnatural. Chapter 598. Heaven's Secret Territory. Smoke rose, and the thick smell of blood permeated the entire secret territory. The mountains collapsed, and the ground cracked. Corpses littered the ground, and blood flowed freely. The experts from the various forces were all in a sorry state. After a big battle, they forced the beasts from the relic to retreat. However, they also paid a huge price. Many experts were killed by those beasts, and their blood filled the air. The fifth elder's white robe was stained with dust, and his old face was filled with exhaustion. An expert came forward, and with a serious face, he said to the fifth elder, Elder, the origin of these beasts has been investigated. Where did these beasts come from? The fifth elder held his chest and lightly coughed. That expert's face was incomparably serious, and he said seriously, The continent contacted us. According to our description of the beasts, they looked through many books, and finally, they received news from the hidden dragon royal court. These beasts might have come from the netherworld. Netherworld? The fifth elder's eyes slightly shrank, and his face instantly changed. Rincho looked at Bufang turning around to enter the kitchen, and he felt a cold breeze blowing past his head. He was ignored just like that. As the continent walker of the Valley of Gluttony, he was actually ignored just like that. Did this kid really think that after making a few dishes in the Supreme Blade Tyrant's Soul Sea space, he could win against him? How could this little chef know the true abilities of the Valley of Gluttony? The surrounding diners looked at him like he was a joke, and it made him feel very uncomfortable. There was a surge of anger in his heart. However, no matter how he called out to Bufang, Bufang just told him to queue up. This made him feel aggrieved, as if he had punched cotton. You better queue up obediently. Lord Bai is not someone to be trifled with. Nangong Wuk sat on the chair, and picked up a piece of chicken from the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. He happily stuffed it into his mouth, and said with a smile. Hades nodded at the side, eating the spicy strip and drinking the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. He was very satisfied. When Renshu glanced at Hades fearfully. When Renshu wasn't afraid of the puppet, but the man who called himself Hades was too strong. When Renshu couldn't help but fear him. If there was no Hades, he, when Renshu, would have made his move long ago. The chefs of the Valley of Gluttony didn't just have excellent cooking skills. Each disciple's cultivation base had to keep up with theirs, which was why they had to display their formidable abilities. Only when one's cultivation base was strong would one be able to cook high-grade dishes and obtain high-grade ingredients. Hence, in the Valley of Gluttony, every chef was a powerful existence. He, when Rincho, had even reached the peak of the divine physique echelon. He was not afraid of a mere puppet, but the unfathomable Hades, he was still very afraid of him. Looking at Hades, whose mouth was dripping with oil, when Rincho took a deep breath, turned around, and walked out of the store to line up. He endured the humiliation and stood in line. In the process, his anger and humiliation kept accumulating. When it was his turn, he would definitely teach Bufang a real lesson, to teach him how to be a proper person. With this anger, when Rencho's eyes became ruthless, the line moved slowly and time passed quietly. When Rincho, who was dressed in plain clothes, stood in the line, looking at the customers in front of him entering and leaving the restaurant with a satisfied face, he gradually furrowed his brows. He had to admit that this was a successful restaurant. A chef who could make the customers smile was a truly good chef. The Valley of Gluttony's motto had always been like this. He didn't expect to see such a principle from a small chef on the continent. The sun gradually began to set in the west. The number of people in front of one Rincho gradually decreased. Finally, it was one Rincho's turn. When Rincho's heart was filled with excitement. He could already imagine Bufang being defeated by him, and the feeling of satisfaction he would feel when he wiped away his humiliation. However, when he stepped into the restaurant, his sharp eyes swept across the surroundings. A figure walked out from the kitchen. Bufang shook off the water stains on his hands. After wiping them clean, he calmly said, "Today's opening hours have ended. Everyone, please come earlier tomorrow." When the customers heard Bufang's words, they all felt extremely regretful and pitiful. However, they were all clear of Bufang's rules, so they didn't complain and directly left. Only when Rincho stood in the restaurant with a dumbfounded face. What was going on? What was the meaning of this? Was this little chef trying to stir up trouble? He queued for half a day, and in the end, he was told that the opening hours had ended. Where was the trust between people? Owner Bu. At this moment, can I have a cooking competition with you? When Rincho narrowed his eyes and said coldly. Bufang coldly glanced at him. He raised his hand and took off the velvet rope that tied his hair. His jet-black hair instantly spread out, making Bufang feel much more relaxed. Challenge me? Come back tomorrow during opening hours, Bufang said. After saying that, he turned around and planned to continue into the kitchen. When Rencho's face was instantly filled with anger. He coldly stared at Bufang's back. Are you afraid of me, so you have been avoiding me? You don't dare to have a cooking competition with me, because you don't have the confidence, because you think that you can't beat me. When Rincho said, Bufang was stunned. He turned his head in surprise. Everyone in the restaurant was stunned. How could this guy be so thick-skinned? I am the successor of the Valley of Gluttony. I started learning cooking at the age of 3. At the age of 15, I obtained the qualifications to be a chef. At the age of 20, I obtained the title of a third-grade chef. At the age of 30, I obtained the title of a second-grade chef. You are just a chef in a restaurant. How can you be compared to me? Wenrencho's arrogance soared to the sky. Wenrencho's words slightly stunned Bufang. The amount of information within seemed to be a little too much. According to what Wenrencho said, the Valley of Gluttony seemed to have a very complete system of chefs. After coming to the Hidden Dragon continent, Bufang actually had some guesses in his heart. After all, there were so many high-grade ingredients on this continent. How could the chef industry develop so poorly? As expected, there was an existence like the Valley of Gluttony. There was a complete system of chef. According to what Wenrencho said, the Valley of Gluttony should be the so-called heaven for chefs. Quasi-chef, grade 3, grade 2. It sounded like a great job. Bufang knew that Wenrencho's culinary skills were very strong. It could be said that he was the chef with the highest standard that Bufang had met so far. However, according to his own description, the current Wenrencho was only a second-grade chef. What about those above the second-grade chef? First-grade chef? The culinary skills of those existences would not be any weaker than Bufang's. Bufang was deep in thought. A sense of urgency emerged in his heart. After all, Bufang was the man who wanted to stand at the top of the food chain in the fantasy world, the god of cooking. However, despite the urgency, Bufang glanced at Wenrencho and said calmly, "If you want to challenge me, then come earlier tomorrow and queue up. Today's opening hours are over, you." Wenrencho was enraged. Was this an order to chase him away? He was here to ask for advice on cooking, not to order food. Who the hell would want to queue up like an idiot? Today, regardless of whether you accept it or not, I will definitely fight you. I must teach an arrogant little chef like you a lesson. The true energy in Wenrencho's body surged, and an ice-blue kitchen knife appeared in his hand. The knife revolved, and a blue crystal light flickered continuously. The atmosphere in the restaurant suddenly became tense. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flickered, and in an instant, they turned ash-gray. He said mechanically, "Troublemaker, you will be stripped as an example to others." Bang! In the next moment, Xiao Bai shot out and collided with Wenrencho. Wenrencho retreated a few steps, and his face turned solemn. This puppet was indeed not ordinary. Hades and Nangong Wuk were watching from the side, and their faces were filled with curiosity. Wenrencho, who was entangled with Xiao Bai, was also a little anxious. Moreover, he felt a little creeped out, because the Netherworld woman was sitting on the Netherworld ship, swinging her fair and tender legs. A pair of pitch-black, ice-cold eyes were locked onto him. If the Netherworld woman made a move, he, Wenrencho, would really be at a disadvantage. Bufang glanced at him indifferently, then turned around and entered the kitchen. In the distance, Nangong Wuk's eyes lit up. He turned his head to Hades, who was eating a chili strip, and said, "Little Ha, do you know Lord Bai's nickname? People call him the crazy clothes stripping demon. He loves stripping people's clothes the most, and he's invincible. Many people were killed by Lord Bai, and they all left naked." Hades happily sucked on his chili strip, and his expression was that of watching a good show. Crazy clothes stripping demon? It sounds very powerful. Then, why don't you strip one for I to see? Lord Go, who was lying under the path understanding tree, was speechless when he heard the conversation between the two. He adjusted his sleeping position and continued to sleep. In order to see a real clothes stripping, under Nangong Wuk's instigation, Hades quietly made a move with a chili strip in his mouth. A black energy shot out when Wenrencho was trying his best to resist Xiao Bai's attack. It whipped at Wenrencho's legs, causing his body to stiffen, and he lost his balance. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes lit up, and its round head glowed with a radiance. It swung its fan-like hand out. In front of Wenrencho's terrified expression, He pressed his hand on Wen Rincho's body. Rip. It was a wild ripping, tyrannical stripping. A clear and melodious sound rang out. Nangong Wuk widened his eyes. Hades, who was holding a chili strip in his mouth, widened his eyes. They watched as Wen Rincho's body moved in an arc, and the coquettish clothes on his body were torn to shreds, revealing his shining white body. With a bang, he fell outside the store, raising a cloud of dust. Wen Rincho's face turned completely red. He felt a sense of humiliation. As a traveler of the Valley of Gluttony, he had never suffered such a huge loss. A surge of anger surged in his chest. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes flickered, and its huge body blocked the entrance like a small mountain. Hades and Nangong Wuk stuck their heads out, looking at Wen Rincho's body, and muttered to themselves. Wen Rincho felt as though his chest was about to explode. His eyes turned red. He grabbed the ice-blue kitchen knife and wiped it across his palm. Immediately, beads of blood splattered out and a strange wave spread in the void. I, Wen Rincho, swear with my heart that I will have a chef's challenge with Bufang, betting my dignity and honor. Wen Rincho almost roared out. As soon as he finished speaking, a huge blood-colored shadow of a ferocious giant beast suddenly appeared behind Wen Rincho. It opened its big mouth and bit down, swallowing Wen Rincho. However, after swallowing him, the shadow seemed to have turned into a breeze and dissipated. Buzz, as though it had become some kind of oath, an invisible connection was formed between Wen Rincho and Bufang. In the kitchen, Bufang seemed to feel something and his whole body froze. In his mind, the system's solemn and serious voice suddenly rang out. The Valley of Gluttony's Chef's Challenge oath has been initiated, and the host cannot reject it. Once the Chef's Challenge oath is initiated, the culinary skills of both parties will compete. The loser will have his knife broken, and he will never cook again. Chapter 599. Bufang was a little surprised that the system would speak to him. Chef's Challenge. What was that? Not allowed to reject? That sounds very powerful. System, what is this Chef's Challenge? Bufang asked the system in his mind as he stopped what he was doing and frowned. He didn't know that Wen Rincho was shouting at the top of his lungs outside the restaurant. When he received the Chef's Challenge, he was completely stunned. Moreover, the actions that triggered the system's reaction were naturally not ordinary. Chef's Challenge is a battle of dignity between chefs. Using dishes as the basis, the contestants bet their dignity and future on the culinary path. The winner has the right to deprive the other party of the right to cook and take away the other party's kitchen knife, causing the other party to completely leave the culinary world. The system said solemnly. However, those words sent a chill down Bufang's spine. This chill caused goosebumps to appear on Bufang's skin. It was a little scary. Depriving the other party of the right to cook and taking away the other party's kitchen knife. This chef's challenge was really vicious. To a chef who loved to cook, depriving the other party of the right to cook was such a cruel thing. Bufang didn't expect such a thing to happen to him. Wen Rincho actually wanted to have a chef's challenge with him. Was this guy crazy? System. According to your explanation, shouldn't this chef's challenge be voluntary? Why don't I have the right to reject it? Bufang asked in confusion. As a man who wants to become the god of cooking in the fantasy world, the host shouldn't have any fear. He should press forward and not reject any chef's challenge. Don't be a coward, just do it, the system said. Bufang was silent for a while, and then he understood. Since he wanted to become the god of cooking, how could he be afraid? If he retreated because he was afraid of losing the right to cook, a flaw would appear in his heart and it would become a stumbling block on his path to becoming the god of cooking. Neither the system nor Bufang would allow such a thing to happen. Bufang's eyes narrowed. Outside the restaurant, Wen Rincho let out a roar, and an invisible wave spread out. Nangong Wuk and the others were startled, and they thought that something had happened. However, no matter how they looked, they couldn't find anything. This guy. He actually dares to bluff people. Chef's challenge. It sounds really awesome, Nangong Wuk muttered. Hades furrowed his brows. His hair had returned to normal today, and it was black and shiny. His cultivation was much higher than Nangong Wuk's, so Nangong Wuk was unable to sense it. However, Hades was able to sense the fluctuation in the air. In particular, the shadow that flashed behind when Rincho made him feel a sense of familiarity. He seemed to have encountered that aura somewhere. Hades, who had a spicy strip in his mouth, thought for a while. He really couldn't think of anything, so he was too lazy to think about it. Little Black, who was lying under the path understanding tree, also opened its eyes. When it saw the aura gradually dissipating from the naked Wenrencho's body, its eyebrows instantly twitched. It's that thing's aura. In the darkness of the kitchen, a skinny figure slowly appeared, walking out from the darkness. The light gradually dissipated, revealing a familiar face. Everyone was taken aback. Honorbu? Why did he come out? Didn't they say that the restaurant was closed for the day? Bufang saw Wenrencho, and Wenrencho also saw Bufang. The corners of Wenrencho's mouth twitched slightly, revealing a trace of a sinister arc. You finally came out. I thought you didn't dare to accept my chef's challenge. It seems like you still have some guts. Bufang walked to the door, looking at Wenrencho expressionlessly. Everyone seemed to feel the stagnant aura in the air. After a long time, Bufang then sighed softly. Why bother? Since the chef's challenge has begun, let's not pretend anymore. Tomorrow I will come on time for the appointment. Bufang, you should prepare for the chef's challenge. As the one who proposed the chef's challenge, the theme for tomorrow's chef's challenge will be decided by me, and it will be fish. You're on your own, Wenrencho said coldly. After saying that, he covered his lower body and limped out of the cloud mist restaurant. Everyone looked at Wenrencho's departing figure, remaining silent for a long time. Bufang stood at the entrance of the restaurant, gazing at Wenrencho's departing figure. After a long time, the corners of his mouth twitched. Nangong Wuk was at a loss. He felt that he couldn't understand what Bufang and Wenrencho were talking about. Old Bu, what is this chef's challenge? It sounds very powerful. Nangong Wuk looked at Bufang and asked. Bufang turned his head, glanced at him, and said calmly, the so-called chef's challenge is similar to a battle of life and death between martial artists. The difference is that the loser doesn't die, but is stripped of his right to cook, never to be a chef again. What? Everyone was shocked. This was a chef's challenge? It was the first time they heard of it. Stripping a chef of his right to cook. This was simply too cruel. Old Bu, if you lose, doesn't that mean you won't be able to cook in the future? Doesn't that mean I won't be able to eat that delicious Buddha jumps over the wall soup anymore? Nangong Wuk covered his chest, his face full of fear. Behind him, Hades had a chili strip in his mouth. He also covered his chest, his face full of fear as he said, That's right. If you lose, I won't be able to eat the delicious chili strip anymore. No way. I will go and kill that bastard right now. Once the chef's challenge starts, it means that both parties have signed a contract. Neither party is allowed to hurt the other party, and the violator will be punished, Bufang said. Hades was stunned. He held the chili strip in his mouth, feeling a little helpless. Sigh, actually, I didn't want it to be like this. Bufang sighed, turned, and walked toward the kitchen. It would be great if everyone could cook happily. Hades and Nangong Wuk looked at each other, then both of them left the restaurant. Tomorrow's chef's challenge. That was a battle that concerned the dignity of chef. The two of them suddenly felt a little excited. When Wenrencho returned to the inn, his face was a little dark. Fortunately, he had prepared a lot of clothes for traveling the continent. He found a secluded place and put on a set of cloth clothes. That was why he did not become the center of attention. Otherwise, A naked walker of the Valley of Gluttony would be extremely embarrassing. Sitting on a chair in the inn, when Rincho poured himself a cup of tea. The inn he stayed in was one of the best inns in Heavenly Mist City. The boiling hot tea fragrance wafted out, causing him to be slightly intoxicated. After drinking the tea, when Rincho began to think about the dish he would cook for tomorrow's chef's challenge. The topic he chose was fish. This was also the type of cuisine he was most proficient in. Previously, during the inheritance of the Supreme Blade Tyrant, although he was suppressed by Bufang, he was completely unconvinced. That was because he knew that the type of cuisine he was most proficient in was fish. This chef's challenge concerned the future of his culinary skills and his dignity. Naturally, he had to show his true strength. Raising his palm, a wave of cold air spread out, and an ice-cold crystal kitchen knife appeared in his hand. Caressing the ice-cold kitchen knife, when Rencho's face revealed a trace of intoxication. He touched the knife's body, slowly rubbing it. Hidden Dragon Continent, Central Mountain Range. The continuous mountain range rose and fell, and all kinds of ferocious mountain peaks shot up into the sky, like spirit beasts roaring to the heavens. In the continuous mountain range there was a valley, and in the valley there was a huge, sparkling lake. The lake's water was azure blue. Around the lake there were circles of towering buildings. In one of the towering buildings, a figure slowly opened his eyes. It was an old man with white hair and a face full of wrinkles. The old man coughed, stood up, and slowly walked to the window, standing in front of it. Creak! A distant sound rang out, and a figure pushed the door open, walking in from outside respectfully. Teacher, Junior Brother Wenren's name on the tablet of gluttony is reacting. He should have started a chef's challenge with someone outside. That figure said respectfully. The old man's breathing was very steady, and the wrinkles on his face slightly trembled. His eyes looked far away, looking at the sparkling lake, but he did not say anything. After a long time, he slowly opened his mouth, and his voice was a little hoarse. Simply ridiculous. He actually dared to start a chef's challenge outside the valley. If he loses, he will completely lose the face of the Valley of Gluttony. The old man's voice was a little sullen, and there was a sense of terror that came from not being angry. The air seemed to be stagnant at this moment, causing the respectful figure behind him to slightly tremble. Teacher, in the outside world, how could Junior Brother Wenren lose? All the elite chefs of the Hidden Dragon Continent have gathered in the Valley of Gluttony. How could those ordinary chefs in the outside world be a match for Junior Brother? The figure seemed to be a little relaxed as he said. The old man slowly turned around, and his white hair gently fluttered in the wind. Don't underestimate the people in the world. You can leave now. If that kid Wenren Cho loses, you will personally go out of the valley and bring him back. At the same time, you can also recruit the person who defeated him into the valley. This jade talisman is the 10,000-mile talisman. Take it. The old man raised his hand, and a brown jade talisman floated out, landing in the hand of that figure. The figure's face slightly changed. Did teacher calculate something? Why was he so unconfident in his junior brother? Could it be that there was someone outside the valley who could reach the level of a first-grade chef? How monstrous would that person be? You can leave now. The old man waved his hand. That figure immediately retreated. With his hands behind his back, the old man turned around to face the big lake, and his eyes slightly drooped. Who did Wenren Cho meet this time? The tablet of gluttony's soul that was triggered by the chef's challenge oath could not cover the other party. It was rejected by an unfathomable force. What actually happened? The ancient Shura city was located in the west of the Hidden Dragon Continent. That place was desolate and boundless. Yellow sand filled the sky, and there were terrifying insects and beasts rolling and roaring in the yellow sand. Terrifying energy waves spread out. Suddenly, the yellow sand that filled the sky stopped moving. The insects and beasts also instantly burrowed into the yellow sand, not daring to even breathe loudly. In the depths of the yellow sand, many black figures appeared. Countless blood-haired experts wearing armor stood there. The Shura Saintess was also wearing a martial attire. Her expression was solemn, and the armor on her body bound her beautiful figure, making her even more charming. Her perfectly straight and fair legs were exposed, sparkling and translucent. Even if the yellow sand were to blow, it would not affect her fair skin in the slightest. However, the Shura Saintess's expression was not very optimistic. There was even a hint of worry in between her brows. "Your Majesty, are we really going to attack the Pill Palace?" The Shura Saintess asked an ordinary-looking youth beside her. That youth was incomparably handsome. His red hair fluttered in the wind, and he had a pair of purple eyes that were as deep as a bottomless pit. "Those who offend my ancient Shura city will be killed no matter how far they are. Whether it's the Pill Palace or the chef who controls the Shura Tower, they all must die." The handsome youth's lips curled into a cold smile as he said. Chapter 600. Early morning. The sky began to drizzle, and the gloomy weather gradually brought a chill to the air. Bufang opened his eyes and got up from his bed. After washing up, he walked out of his room and went to the kitchen. Although the chef's challenge with Wenrinshou was about to begin, Bufang didn't seem worried at all. Bufang rubbed his sleepy head and yawned. Green smoke curled up from his hands as he prepared to practice his knife skills and dishes. He cooked the sweet and sour ribs and dragon blood rice for the two foodies in the restaurant before returning to the kitchen. After practicing his knife skills for a while, Bufang stopped and started to think about the dish for the chef's challenge. Fish dish. What dish should I use to challenge Wenrinshou? Bufang thought. Since it was a chef's challenge, Wenrinshou definitely wouldn't use a dish that he wasn't familiar with to compete with Bufang. After all, the chef's challenge concerned a chef's dignity and future. The loser would be deprived of his kitchen knife and the right to cook. It was extremely cruel. Lee's fish? Spicy boiled fish? Fish head tofu soup? Grilled fish? Bufang rubbed his chin and thought. Of course, there were many other fish dishes. Up until now, Bufang had cooked many fish dishes and there were many that he could use. After thinking for a long time, Bufang frowned slightly. He suddenly felt that he could try a new dish this time. A famous dish from his previous life appeared in his mind. He squinted his eyes and twitched the corner of his mouth. That was the dish he wanted to make. Because it was a chef's challenge, the system could actually provide ingredients for Bufang for free. This surprised Bufang. Was this stingy system enlightened? When a plump divine realm fish-type spirit beast landed in front of Bufang and flapped its tail, Bufang was amazed. This was because this fish was really plump. The meat was full of spirit energy. Pinching the fish's body, it was filled with elasticity. The fish's scales were like sharp blades, giving off a sharp aura. After caressing it for a while, Bufang began to process the fish. The dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. After twirling the knife in his hand, he fiercely slashed down, drawing a resplendent arc in the air. The knife flashed with dazzling light. It was drizzling. It was a summer rain, but it was rare to see such light rain. However, even though it was raining, the number of people lining up in front of the restaurant didn't decrease at all. Every single one of them stood at the entrance of the restaurant excitedly, waiting for the bronze gate to open as usual. However, unlike in the past, the diners' faces were filled with excitement and worry. That was because they had received news that owner Bu was going to have a chef's challenge with a very powerful chef. They didn't know what a chef's challenge was, but they felt that it was awesome. However, there were people who understood the stakes of this chef's challenge, and they were worried about Bufang. Until now, Bufang had never lost, even when facing the top alchemists of the Pill Palace. However, at that time, Bufang's opponents were all alchemists. But this time, His opponent was a real chef, moreover, it sounded like a very powerful chef, and he even knew something like a chef's challenge. Rain fell from the sky, drenching the clothes of many people. Suddenly, a commotion came from the street in the distance. A silhouette slowly approached from afar. Everyone's eyes narrowed, because in their line of sight, that silhouette was carrying a huge fat fish on his back. The body of the fish was filled with boundless spiritual energy, constantly absorbing the rainwater in the surrounding sky. That fish was still alive, and it opened and closed its mouth. Under the reflection of the rainwater, its scales sparkled like stars in the night sky. He's here. That's the chef who is going to have a chef's challenge with Onorbu. What a fat fish! What kind of fish is that? Many people exclaimed in surprise. Their eyes widened as they looked at the fish, and they sucked in a breath of cold air. Hades and Nangong Wuk also widened their eyes as they looked at the fat fish, and they exclaimed in admiration. That is a divine realm spirit beast that has broken through 3 of the Supreme Being's shackles. It's called the Luminous Cod. I heard that it can spit out a domain, and it can freeze the movements of people within it. Nangong Wuk exclaimed in admiration. Hades was surprised, and he looked at Nangong Wuk suspiciously. Are the youngsters nowadays so knowledgeable? However, the flesh of this fish is very soft, and it requires a lot of control over the fire. If you don't control the fire well, the flesh will become loose. Nangong Wuk continued. Hades was even more surprised. How do you know that? Aren't you an alchemist? Nangong Wuk snorted and said, Even though I'm an alchemist, I have the heart of a foodie. Ever since I ate Old Boo's dish, I started researching ingredients. Aren't we going to compete with fish this time? I flipped through all the information I had. Just as the two of them were conversing, the tightly shut bronze gate of the Cloud Mist restaurant slowly opened. A creaking sound rang out. Everyone's gazes shifted over and landed on the bronze gate that was opening. A figure walked out from it. Bufang stretched his body, and he looked at everyone with a calm gaze. Good morning, everyone, Bufang said calmly. Owner Bu, we support you. You will definitely win the chef's challenge. Owner Bu, you must win. I haven't had enough of your dishes. Owner Bu, why don't you start today's business first? Otherwise, if we lose, we won't be able to taste your dishes. Bufang's face darkened. What were these people talking about? What did they mean by starting today's business first? Did they not have any confidence in him? The crowd opened up a path, and when Rincho, who was carrying the luminous cod on his back, slowly walked over. His feet stepped on the wet ground, causing the water to splash everywhere. He raised his head and looked at Bufang calmly. Are you ready? Our chef's challenge is about to begin. These calm words were filled with a sharp aura and a terrifying battle intent. When Rincho was very excited, the muscles on his body were slightly trembling. He felt that he was finally going to wipe away his previous humiliation. Bufang also walked out of the restaurant, standing on the empty ground in front of the restaurant. The owners of the elixir stores consciously moved their elixir stores away, leaving enough space for the two of them to have a chef's challenge. The air suddenly became stagnant, and the falling rainwater seemed to become bone-chilling. Hades's handsome face revealed a hint of seriousness. He waved his hand, and instantly, a layer of light shrouded the area, isolating the rainwater. However, the raindrops, which were getting heavier and heavier, fell on the light curtain and splashed around, making pitter-patter sounds. Everyone held their breaths, looking carefully at the two people in the arena. Buzz, a metal table appeared. When Rincho threw the luminous cod on the metal table with a back throw, the loud bang made everyone's heart skip a beat. The theme of this chef's challenge is fish. I wonder if Owner Bu is ready? I hope Owner Bu won't let me down. The corner of Wen Rincho's mouth curled up. An icy blue light appeared in his hand, and the surrounding temperature suddenly dropped. An ice blade appeared in his hand. The ice blade spun and swept across. Swoosh! The flying fish scales shot out like flying daggers. That smooth movement made everyone exclaim in surprise. This chef's standard was really not weaker than Ownerbu's. The crowd was suddenly filled with anticipation. Perhaps this would be a very exciting chef's challenge. The kitchen knife cut horizontally, and the fish head was cut off. The white and tender fish meat was instantly revealed. When Rincho raised his head and looked at the surprised expressions on everyone's faces, the corner of his mouth instantly curled up, revealing a trace of satisfaction. And in the midst of everyone's exclamations, the kitchen knife shook, and with a ripping sound, it pierced into the belly of the fish. In the next moment it was pulled out along with the fish bones. With a turn of the kitchen knife, it drew an arc, and the fish bones flew out like scattered flowers. It was incomparably dazzling. Bufang looked at Wenrencho's knife skills and was slightly surprised. This knife skill was not bad. Was this the strength of Wenrencho? The strength of a second-grade chef from the Valley of Gluttony? A black pan with a flat bottom appeared, floating in the sky. It was obvious that this was not an ordinary pan. With a snap of his fingers, a ball of red flames darted out, drilling into the bottom of the pan. In a short while, the pan emitted green smoke. A few spiritual ingredients were thrown up by Wenrencho. The icy blue knife in his hand flashed, and these spiritual ingredients were instantly cut into pieces. They were scattered into the pan. A wave of medicinal fragrance spread out from the pan, and everyone opened their nostrils and began to take a deep breath. Hades looked on curiously. This was the first time he saw a battle between chefs. This kind of unique competition made him very excited and expectant. When Rincho took advantage of the time when the spiritual ingredients in the pan emitted the fragrance, and began to cut the fish. He did not choose the whole fish, but chose the fattest part of the fish. That circle of fish meat was tender, and it was the most essential part of the fish. Carefully using the ice knife to support himself, when Rencho's fingers shook, and he actually used a unique technique to massage the fish meat rapidly. His technique was dazzling. After the massage, he tossed the fish into the air. His hand flashed, and instantly a wine jar appeared. With a flick of his finger, the wine jar exploded, and crystal-clear wine flew out, diffusing into the air. Under Wenrencho's control, it instantly permeated the whole fish. With a twist of his finger, the ice knife flew up, and he used the back of the knife to hit the body of the fish. This caused the wine to permeate into the fish meat, and the fish meat that was floating in the air became even more crystal clear. True energy surged, and after the wine had permeated into the fish meat, Wenrencho activated his own true energy, and sucked out the wine from the fish meat. Swish! The fish meat fell into a large pile of starch that was prepared, and the starch was evenly distributed on the fish body. After finishing all this, Wenrencho carefully raised his hand, and dragged the fish meat, and placed it into the pan that was already filled with fragrance. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Once it entered the pan, a sizzle sound could be heard, and the fragrance instantly soared. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Looking at Wenrencho's series of actions, they really did not have any confidence in Bufang. That gorgeous operation, that incomparably dazzling knife skill, all of it dazzled their eyes. This time, old Bu is really in danger. Nangong Wuk's eyes widened and he said. Hades, on the other hand, curled his lips and said, if old Bu used chili strips, he would definitely kill this thing. However, unlike the crowd's worries, Bufang's state of mind was very calm. With a flash of light in his hand, a table was placed in front of him, and a plump fish appeared, landing on the table. Bufang gently exhaled, and he clasped his hands together, and the corners of his mouth curled up. West Lake sweet and sour fish. Come out. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.